I never thought silence could have weight, but it does. It presses down on your chest like water, fills your lungs like concrete, settles into your bones until you forget what it felt like to be light. The day I discovered what my mother had done, the silence in our house became so heavy I could barely stand upright. It was late October, the kind of autumn day when the sky turns grey too early and the wind carries the smell of smoke from distant fires. I was 34 years old, standing in my childhood bedroom, now converted into my mother's sewing room, holding a shoebox that shouldn't have been hidden behind the insulation in the attic crawl space. Inside were letters, dozens of them, maybe 100, all addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen in 23 years. My father's handwriting. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the box. I sat down hard on the floor, right there in the middle of the sewing room, surrounded by fabric scraps and half-finished quilts, and stared at the return address on the first envelope. James Mitchell, Douglas Correctional Facility, Chino, California. My father had been writing to me from prison for over 2 decades, and my mother had hidden every single letter. I need to go back. I need to tell you how we got here, why this box of letters felt like a bomb going off in my hands, why the discovery split my life into a clean before and after. I need to tell you about the night my father was taken away and the lie my mother told me that shaped the next 23 years of my life. I was 11 years old when the police came to our house. It was a Thursday night in February, cold enough that we'd had the fireplace going all evening. I remember because I'd been lying on the carpet in front of it, doing my homework, enjoying the warmth on my back. My father was in his study, working on his dissertation. My mother was in the kitchen, making tea. Everything felt normal, safe. The way home is supposed to feel when you're 11 and the world still makes sense. Then came the knock on the door. Not a friendly knock, a hard, official knock that made my mother drop her teacup. I heard it shatter on the kitchen floor, heard her gasp, heard my father's study door open. "I'll get it," he said, his voice tight in a way I'd never heard before. I sat up, watching as he walked to the front door. He paused with his hand on the knob, turned to look back at my mother. They held each other's gaze for what felt like forever, but was probably only seconds. Something passed between them, some silent communication I was too young to understand. Then he opened the door. "James Mitchell?" A man's voice, formal and hard. "Yes." "I'm Detective Harrison. This is Detective Chen. We have a warrant for your arrest." The next few minutes were a blur. I remember my mother screaming. I remember my father being led out in handcuffs, and the way he tried to turn back to look at us, but the detectives wouldn't let him. I remember neighbours coming out onto their porches, watching. I remember the red and blue lights from the police cars painting our White House in alternating colours like a nightmare carnival. Most of all, I remember my father's face as they put him in the back of the police car. He was looking at me through the window and he was crying. I'd never seen my father cry before. I didn't even know fathers could cry. My mother pulled me inside and closed the door. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. She sank down onto the floor in the hall right there by the front door, and I sat down next to her. "Mom?" My voice came out small and scared. "What's happening? Why did they take Daddy?" She didn't answer for a long time. She just stared at the closed door like she could still see him through it. "Mom?" I tried again. Finally, she looked at me. Her face was white, her eyes were red, and when she spoke, her voice was flat and distant. "Your father did something very bad, Meredith. Something he can never take back." "What did he do?" "He hurt someone. He killed someone." The words didn't make sense. They were too big, too impossible. My father was a professor at the university. He taught history. He wore cardigans with elbow patches and reading glasses on a chain. He helped me with my homework and made pancakes on Sunday mornings and did terrible impressions of movie characters that made me laugh. He couldn't have killed someone. That's what bad people did in movies, not what fathers did in real life. "That's not true," I said. "Daddy wouldn't do that." "I know it's hard to understand," my mother said. "I know you love him, but sometimes people aren't who we think they are." Over the next few days, I learned what my father was accused of. It was all over the news, all over the papers. The other kids at school whispered about it. Their parents had told them to stay away from me, like whatever my father had done might be contagious. According to the prosecution, my father had been having an affair with a graduate student named Rebecca Hartwell. 22 years old, bright, ambitious. When she tried to end the relationship, my father had gone to her apartment one night and strangled her. The evidence was overwhelming, the prosecutor said. My father's DNA under her fingernails, his fingerprints at the scene. Witnesses who had seen them arguing the day before. His car parked outside her apartment building the night she died. My father pleaded not guilty. He swore he didn't do it, that he'd been set up, that yes, they'd had a relationship, and yes, they'd argued, but he hadn't killed her. He'd gone to her apartment to talk, found her door unlocked, found her already dead, panicked and ran. No one believed him. The trial lasted 3 weeks. My mother wouldn't let me attend, but I saw clips on the news. My father looked smaller somehow, diminished in his court clothes, standing next to his public defender looked tired and overworked. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found him guilty of second-degree murder. 25 years to life. My mother sold our house a month after the sentencing. She said we needed a fresh start, somewhere people didn't know us, didn't know what my father had done. We moved 4 hours north to Sacramento, to a small apartment in a part of town where no one asked questions. She changed our last name from Mitchell to her maiden name, Calloway. She got a job as an administrative assistant at a dental office. She never spoke about my father again. When I asked about him, and I did many times in those first few months, she would get this look on her face like she was closing a door inside herself. He's not part of our lives anymore, Meredith. We need to move forward. Can I write to him? Can I visit him? No. He doesn't want that. He asked me to tell you that he thinks it's better if you forget about him, that he doesn't want to ruin your life more than he already has. I was 12 years old. I believed her. So I tried to forget. I tried to become the person my mother needed me to be. Quiet, well-behaved, someone who didn't draw attention or ask difficult questions. Someone who didn't have a father in prison for murder. The years passed. I did well in school because school was safe, predictable. I didn't make many friends because friendships meant questions about my family, my background, my father. I learned to deflect, to give vague answers, to change the subject. I went to community college, then transferred to UC Davis. I majored in English literature because I'd always loved books, loved the way stories could take you somewhere else, make you someone else. I graduated, got a job at a small publishing house in San Francisco as an editorial assistant. I dated occasionally, but never seriously. My mother said I was too picky, that I needed to give people a chance. But the truth was I was afraid of letting anyone too close, afraid of what they'd think if they knew, afraid of inheriting whatever darkness had lived inside my father. Because if he could do what he did, if a man who seemed good and kind could actually be a murderer, what did that mean about me? What darkness might be hiding in my own blood? I met Daniel when I was 28. He worked in marketing at the same publishing house, on a different floor. We ran into each other in the break room one day, both reaching for the same mug. He smiled, I smiled, and somehow we ended up having lunch together. Daniel was easy to be with. He talked enough that I didn't have to. He had a normal family, parents who were still married, a younger brother, a golden retriever named Murphy. His life was uncomplicated in a way that felt like oxygen after years of holding my breath. We dated for 8 months before he asked about my father. We were at his apartment, cooking dinner together. He was chopping vegetables as I was stirring sauce, and he asked casually, "So what does your dad do?" I'd been expecting this question for months, had my deflection ready. "He's not around." "Oh, I'm sorry, did your parents divorce?" Something like that. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see he knew I was hiding something, but he didn't push. He just said, "Okay," and went back to chopping vegetables. That night, lying in his bed with his arm around me, I almost told him. The words were right there, pushing at my throat. My father is in prison for murder. I haven't seen him since I was 11. I don't know if he's alive or dead. But I didn't say anything. I just held my breath until the urge passed. We got engaged a year later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. My mother came wearing a pale blue dress and a tight smile. She hugged Daniel, told him he was getting a wonderful woman, didn't mention my father once. Planning the wedding was harder than I expected. Every tradition seemed to involve fathers, father-daughter dance, walking down the aisle, the toast. Daniel's parents kept asking about my dad. When they would get to meet him, would he be able to make it to the wedding? Finally, I told them he was dead. It was easier than the truth. Cleaner. They made sympathetic faces, told me how sorry they were, stopped asking questions. My mother found out I'd told people my father was dead. She called me a week before the wedding, her voice cold. "That's probably for the best," she said. "He might as well be dead. He's dead to us." I got married on a Saturday in June. It was a beautiful wedding. Small garden ceremony, string quartet, flowers everywhere. Daniel looked handsome in his suit. I wore my grandmother's pearls. My mother cried during the ceremony, but they were the wrong kind of tears. They looked like grief. When it came time for the father-daughter dance, the DJ played the song I'd chosen, and I danced with my mother's brother, my Uncle Robert. He was kind about it, didn't ask questions, just held my hands and swayed to the music. But the whole time, I kept thinking about my real father, wondering where he was, if he was still alive, if he ever thought about me, if he knew I'd got married without him. Daniel and I bought a house in Oakland. Small, 2 bedrooms, a tiny backyard with a lemon tree. We painted the walls together, hung pictures, made it ours. We talked about having kids someday, but not yet. We were still figuring out how to be married, how to navigate the everyday intimacy of shared space and shared lives. I thought I was happy. Or at least I thought this was what happiness looked like. Safe, comfortable, predictable. But there was always something missing. Some empty space inside me I couldn't fill. Some question I couldn't stop asking. What if my mother had lied? Not about what my father did. I'd seen the evidence, read the news articles, knew he'd been convicted. But what if she'd lied about him not wanting to see me? What if he'd tried to reach out and she'd kept it from me? I tried to push the thoughts away. My mother had done what she thought was best. She'd protected me, given me a chance at a normal life. I should be grateful, but the questions wouldn't go away. When I was 32, I did something I'd never done before. I looked up my father's case online. It was surprisingly easy to find. Court records, news articles, even a website dedicated to the case, run by someone who thought he was innocent. I stayed up all night reading everything I could find, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. The more I read, the more questions I had. The case against my father was strong, but not airtight. Yes, his DNA was under Rebecca's fingernails, but he admitted they'd been together earlier that day. Yes, his fingerprints were at the scene, but he said he'd found her already dead. Yes, witnesses saw them arguing, but that didn't prove he killed her. The conviction seemed to rest heavily on the fact that he'd run, that he'd found her body and panicked and left instead of calling the police. The prosecution had painted that as consciousness of guilt, but the website, run by a former law student named Marcus Chen, argued that it could just as easily be explained as fear. My father was having an affair with a student. He found her dead in her apartment. He had no witnesses, no alibi. He knew how it would look. So he ran, and in running he sealed his fate. I read Marcus Chen's analysis of the case. He pointed out inconsistencies in the timeline, questioned whether my father would have had enough time to commit the murder when the prosecution said he did. He noted that there had been a series of break-ins in Rebecca's neighbourhood around that time, suggested that maybe she'd interrupted a burglary, but the police had been so sure it was my father. They'd stopped looking for other suspects. I couldn't sleep for days after I read all of this. I kept thinking about my father in prison, locked up for 20 years for something he might not have done. But I still didn't reach out to him. I was too afraid. Afraid of what I'd find. Afraid of opening that door after so many years of keeping it closed. Then, 2 years later, my mother got sick. It started with headaches. She said it was stress from work, that she just needed to rest more. But the headaches got worse, and then came the dizzy spells, the confusion, the morning she couldn't remember my name. Brain tumour, glioblastoma, aggressive, inoperable. The doctor gave her 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. She refused treatment. "I've lived my life," she said. "I'm tired, Meredith. I'm ready." She moved in with Daniel and me for her final months. We set up the spare bedroom with her things, made it as comfortable as we could. Hospice came 3 times a week. The house smelled like medication and the lavender lotion the nurses used. My mother was dying, and I couldn't stop thinking about my father. One afternoon, while my mother was sleeping, I finally worked up the courage to ask her the question that had been eating at me for 2 years. "Mom," I said softly, "did Dad ever try to contact me after he went to prison?" Her eyes were closed, but I saw her face change, tighten. Even dying, she was still keeping secrets. "Why would you ask that?" Her voice was weak, raspy. "I've been thinking about him. I've been reading about his case, and I need to know. Did he write to me? Did he try to call? Did he ask about me?" She was quiet for so long, I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she opened her eyes and looked at me. "What does it matter now? It matters to me. He's a murderer, Meredith. He killed that girl. Why do you need anything more than that? Because he's my father. Because I deserve to know the truth." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe. Or anger. Or fear. "The truth is that he destroyed our lives. The truth is that I spent 20 years protecting you from him, giving you a chance to be normal, and now when I'm dying, you want to bring him back into our lives?" "I just want to know if he tried to reach out." She closed her eyes again. "Let it go, Meredith. Please, let me die without having to talk about him." So I did. I let it go because what else could I do? She was dying, and I wasn't cruel enough to force the issue. My mother died on a Tuesday morning in early October, quietly, with me holding her hand. The hospice nurse said it was peaceful, that she didn't suffer at the end. I'd like to believe that's true. The funeral was small, a few people from her work, some neighbours, my Uncle Robert. Daniel stood beside me, solid and steady, holding my hand while they lowered the casket into the ground. I felt hollow, not sad exactly, just empty. Like the last thread connecting me to my childhood had been cut, and now I was floating, unmoored. After the funeral, I had to go through my mother's things, pack up her clothes, sort through her papers, decide what to keep and what to donate. Daniel offered to help, but I told him I needed to do it alone. I started with her bedroom, clothes in bags for donation, jewellery in a box to look through later, old shoes, old purses, the accumulation of a lifetime. Then I moved to the closets, the back of the closets where we keep the things we don't want to think about. That's where I found the attic access. Our house was old, built in the 1940s, and the attic wasn't really an attic, just a crawl space above the ceiling with exposed insulation and old wiring. I'd been up there once when we first moved in just to look around, hadn't been back since. But standing in my mother's closet, looking at that small door in the ceiling, I felt something pull at me. Some instinct that said, "Look up there." So I got the stepladder from the garage, pushed open the small door and pulled myself up into the dusty crawl space. It was hot and dark and smelled like old wood. I used my phone's flashlight to look around, just exposed beams and insulation and dust. Nothing interesting. I was about to climb back down when I saw it. A shoebox, wrapped in plastic, tucked behind the insulation near the eaves. My heart started pounding before I even knew why. I pulled out the box, climbed down the ladder, sat on my mother's bedroom floor and opened it. Letters. Dozens and dozens of letters, all addressed to me, all from Douglas Correctional Facility, all from my father. The earliest one was dated March 1998. 1 month after he was sent to prison. The most recent was from last year, just a few months before my mother got sick. 23 years of letters. 23 years of reaching out. 23 years my mother had kept from me. I picked up the first letter with shaking hands. The envelope was yellowed with age, the writing slightly faded. I opened it carefully, pulled out the thin paper inside. "Dear Meredith, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Your mother says you don't want to hear from me, that you're angry and hurt and need space. I understand that. I don't blame you. But I need to write to you anyway. Even if you never read these words, I need to say them. I didn't kill that girl, Meredith. I know how it looks. I know what everyone thinks. But I swear to you, I didn't do it. I found her dead and I panicked. And I made a terrible mistake by running. But I didn't kill her. I know you're probably too young to understand this right now. I know your mother is probably telling you I'm a monster. Maybe I am. Maybe I deserve to be here for the affair alone, for betraying your mother, for being selfish and weak. But I'm not a murderer. I think about you every day. I wonder if you're doing okay, if you're making friends at your new school, if you still like to draw. I wonder if you hate me. I wonder if you think about me at all. I love you, sweetheart. No matter what happens, no matter how long I'm in here, that will never change. Your dad, I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I opened the second letter, the 3rd, the 10th, the 50th. I read all night. My father had written to me about his life in prison, the terrible food, the noise, the way time moved differently inside. But mostly, he wrote about me. He asked questions he knew I couldn't answer. He told me about memories we'd shared. He apologized over and over for ruining my life. In the later letters, his tone changed. He stopped protesting his innocence quite so much. Not because he was guilty, but because he realized it didn't matter anymore. He'd been convicted. This was his life now. Instead, he wrote about books he was reading, classes he was taking, ways he was trying to better himself. He wrote about hope, not of getting out, but of someday being able to reconnect with me. He asked about my life, even though he had no way of knowing what was happening in it. Did I graduate high school? Did I go to college? Was I happy? In one letter from 5 years ago, he wrote, I heard through a cousin of your mother's that you got married. I don't know if it's true, but if it is, I want you to know how happy that makes me. I hope he's good to you. I hope he makes you laugh. I hope you're building the kind of life you deserve. I wish I could have been there to walk you down the aisle. I wish I could have met him, shaken his hand, told him to take care of my little girl. But I'm glad you didn't wait for me. I'm glad you didn't put your life on hold for someone who might never get out of here. Be happy, Meredith. That's all I've ever wanted for you. I sat there on my mother's bedroom floor, surrounded by 23 years of letters, and felt the foundation of my entire adult life crack open. My mother had lied to me. Not just once, not just about whether my father wanted contact. She'd actively hidden his attempts to reach me, had stored these letters in the attic like guilty secrets, had let me believe for over 2 decades that my father had abandoned me. Why? I wanted to be angry with her. I wanted to rage at her for stealing this from me. But she was dead, and I couldn't ask her why she'd done it, couldn't demand explanations or apologies. All I could do was sit there with these letters and realize that I'd spent half my life grieving a loss that was manufactured. My father hadn't forgotten about me. He'd never stopped reaching out. Daniel found me the next morning, still sitting on the floor, letters scattered around me like fallen leaves. Mère? He stood in the doorway, his face concerned. Have you been up all night? I woke up and you weren't in bed. I looked up at him. I must have looked terrible, eyes swollen from crying, still wearing yesterday's clothes. My father's been writing to me, I said. My voice came out hoarse. For 23 years, and my mother hid all of his letters. Daniel's face changed as he took in the scene, the shoebox, the envelopes, the evidence of my mother's deception scattered across the floor. He came and sat down next to me, picked up one of the letters, read it silently, then another, then another. Jesus! He said softly. Your mom did this? I nodded. Why? I don't know. Protection, maybe? She thought she was keeping me safe? From letters? From him. From what he did. From the pain of maintaining a relationship with someone in prison. I picked up one of the more recent letters. Or maybe she was just angry. Maybe she wanted to punish him. By punishing you too? I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. This hadn't just hurt my father. It had hurt me. It had shaped my entire life, the way I saw myself, my fear of relationships, my inability to trust, all because of letters I'd never received. What are you going to do? Daniel asked. I looked at the letters, at the weight of all those words, all those years. I don't know, I said. I need to think. But I already knew what I was going to do. I'd known from the moment I opened that first letter I was going to go see my father. Doug Douglas Correctional Facility was a 3-hour drive from Oakland. I'd looked it up online, a medium-security prison in Chino, California, housing about 3,500 inmates. The website had visiting information, rules and regulations, things you could and couldn't bring. I spent a week preparing. I filled out the visitor application, got approved, scheduled a visit. I didn't tell Daniel what I was planning until the night before I was supposed to go. We were eating dinner, pasta, something simple, and I put down my fork and said, "I'm going to see him tomorrow." Daniel looked at me. He'd been patient all week, giving me space to process, not pushing, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "Are you sure you're ready?" "No, but I'm going anyway. Do you want me to come with you?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted him there, wanted his steady presence beside me, but this was something I needed to do alone. "No, thank you, but no. This is between me and him." Daniel reached across the table, took my hand. "Okay, but call me if you need anything. I'll drive down and get you. I don't care what time it is." I squeezed his hand, grateful. "I will." That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about what I would say, how I would feel seeing my father after 23 years. Would I recognize him? Would he recognize me? I'd been 11 the last time he saw me. Now I was 34, married, a completely different person. What if he was disappointed? What if I wasn't who he'd imagined I'd become? What if he really was guilty? I pushed that thought away, but it kept creeping back. 23 years of letters didn't prove innocence. They just proved he was persistent, that he wanted a relationship with his daughter. But the evidence against him had been strong. The DNA, the fingerprints, the witnesses. He'd been convicted by a jury. He'd been denied appeal after appeal. What if my mother had been right to keep us apart? I got up at 5 a.m, too anxious to sleep anymore. I showered, dressed in jeans and a simple blue sweater. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, pale, nervous, terrified. I left at 6 before Daniel woke up. I left him a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to see my dad. I love you. I'll call you later." The drive took forever and no time at all. I listened to music, then turned it off because I couldn't focus. I stopped for coffee and couldn't drink it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. By the time I reached Chino, pulled up to the facility, parked in the visitor lot, I felt like I was going to throw up. The prison was huge and grey and intimidating. Tall fences topped with razor wire, guard towers, security cameras everywhere. This was where my father had spent the last 23 years of his life. I almost turned around and left. Almost got back in my car and drove home and pretended I'd never found those letters. But I thought about my father writing to me year after year, never knowing if I'd received his letters, never giving up hope. So I got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. The security process was intense. I had to show ID, fill out forms, empty my pockets, go through a metal detector. The guards were professional, but not friendly. This wasn't a place for friendliness. They led me to the visiting room. A large space with small tables bolted to the floor, chairs on either side. Other visitors were already there, waiting. Some looked like they'd done this 100 times. Others, like me, looked terrified. I sat down at the table they assigned me and waited. And waited. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My palms were sweating. I kept wiping them on my jeans. Then a door on the far side of the room opened, and prisoners started filing in. I scanned their faces, looking for my father, trying to remember what he looked like. I had old pictures at home from before, but I hadn't looked at them in years. My mother thrown away most of them when we moved. And then I saw him. He was older, so much older. His hair had gone completely grey. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt, lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. But it was him, my father, after all these years. He was scanning the room too, looking for me. When our eyes met, he stopped walking, just stopped, right there in the middle of the room, and stared at me. I saw his face change, saw disbelief, then hope, then something that looked like pain. He started walking toward me, faster now. A guard said something to him, probably to slow down, and he did, but I could see it was taking effort. He reached my table and just stood there, staring at me like I might disappear if he looked away. "Meredith?" His voice was rough, uncertain. "Is that really you?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "My God, you're all grown up. You're..." His eyes filled with tears. "You're so beautiful." He sat down across from me, slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement would break the spell. We sat there for a long moment, just looking at each other. I noticed things about him, the way his hands shook slightly, the scar above his eyebrow that hadn't been there before, the prison tattoo on his forearm that looked homemade. "I can't believe you're here," he said finally. "I've dreamed about this for so long. I started to think it would never happen." "I got your letters," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "All of them. I just found them last week." His face changed. "What do you mean, you just found them?" "Mom hid them. She told me you didn't want to hear from me, that you said it was better if I forgot about you, but she'd been keeping all your letters in a box in the attic." He sat back in his chair, absorbing this. Something passed across his face. Anger, hurt, resignation. "I wrote to you for 23 years, he said quietly. "Every month, sometimes more. I sent them to your mother, asked her to pass them along. When you never wrote back, I thought you hated me, that you didn't want anything to do with me. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know, I believe you." He reached across the table like he was going to take my hand, then stopped himself. "I'm not allowed to touch you. The rules." "Oh," I pulled my hands back, put them in my lap. "Right." We sat there in awkward silence for a moment. There was so much to say, I didn't know where to start. "She died," I said finally. "Mom, 3 weeks ago, brain tumour." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. I know you two were close." "Were we?" I'd thought so, but now I didn't know. How close could you be with someone who'd lied to you for over 2 decades? "That's when I found the letters," I continued. "I was cleaning out a house. I'm glad you found them, even if..." He trailed off, shook his head. "I'm just glad you're here now." I read all of them. Every single one, even the early ones. Those were pretty rough. I was angry then, scared. "You said you didn't do it, that you didn't kill Rebecca Hartwell." His face hardened. "I didn't." "But you were convicted. The evidence..." "I know what the evidence showed. I know how it looked. But I didn't kill her, Meredith. I've spent 23 years in here and I've made my peace with a lot of things. But I will never admit to something I didn't do." I looked at him, trying to read his face, trying to see the truth. This was the question that had haunted me my entire adult life. Was my father a murderer? "Tell me what happened," I said. "Please, I need to hear it from you." He took a deep breath, let it out slowly. I could see this was hard for him, having to relive it again after all these years. "I was having an affair with Rebecca," he started. "I'm not proud of it. Your mother and I had been having problems, but that's no excuse. I was her professor. She was my student. It was wrong on every level." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We'd been seeing each other for about 6 months when she decided she wanted to end it. She said it had been a mistake, that she needed to focus on her studies, that she was seeing someone else her own age. I was hurt, but I understood. I knew it had to end eventually. He paused, rubbed his face with both hands. "The day she died, we'd met for coffee in the afternoon. Off campus at a place we thought no one would recognise us. We talked about ending things properly, making sure it wouldn't affect her grades or her recommendation letters. It was civil, sad, but civil." He looked down at his hands and I could see he was struggling with what came next. "That evening, around 8 o'clock, she called me. She was crying, panicked. She said someone had been following her, that she was scared, that she didn't know who else to call. I told her to call the police, but she said she was overreacting, that she just needed someone to talk to." So you went to her apartment?" "I went to her apartment. I know how stupid that sounds now. I know what I should have done, but she sounded terrified, and I cared about her, so I went." He paused, took a shaky breath. "When I got there, her door was unlocked, just slightly ajar. I called her name, knocked, pushed the door open. The apartment was dark except for a lamp in the living room. I called for her again. No answer. I could see him reliving it, see the memory playing out behind his eyes. I found her in the bedroom. On the floor. There was..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "There was blood, and I knew immediately that she was dead. The way she was lying there, the way her eyes were open, but not seeing anything. I'd never seen a dead body before, but I knew." "What did you do?" "I panicked. I completely panicked. I should have called the police right then, I know that. But all I could think was how it looked. Me, her professor, in her apartment, her dead on the floor. We'd just broken up. People had seen us arguing that afternoon at the coffee shop." "So you ran?" "I ran. I got back in my car and I drove home and I tried to pretend it hadn't happened. I thought maybe someone else would find her. Maybe I could say I'd never been there. I was thinking about you and your mother, about what this would do to our lives. I wasn't thinking clearly at all. But they found your DNA. Your fingerprints. Of course they did. I'd been seeing her for 6 months. My DNA was all over that apartment. And when I found her, I touched her. I checked for a pulse. Even though I could see she was gone, my fingerprints were on the doorframe, on the light switch. I'd been there dozens of times before. I tried to process this, tried to make sense of it. His story explained the evidence, but it didn't prove his innocence. The prosecution said you strangled her. I know what they said, but I didn't. Someone else killed her, Meredith. Someone was following her. She told me that on the phone. Maybe it was a burglary gone wrong, maybe it was this other guy she was seeing. I don't know. But the police fixated on me and stopped looking for anyone else. Did you tell them about the phone call? About her saying someone was following her? I told my lawyer. He said it wouldn't help, that it just proved I had motive and opportunity, that it made me look even more guilty. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, other inmates and visitors were talking, some laughing, some crying. Life and pain happening in small pockets all around us. Do you believe me? My father asked quietly. I looked at him. This man who'd written to me for 23 years, who'd never given up hope of seeing me again, who'd spent over 2 decades in prison for a crime he swore he didn't commit. I don't know, I said honestly. I want to believe you, but I don't know what to think. He nodded slowly. That's fair. That's more than fair. I've had 23 years to think about that night, to relive it, to wonder what I could have done differently. And the truth is, even if I didn't kill her, I'm responsible for being in that situation in the first place. I'm responsible for the affair, for going to her apartment, for running instead of calling the police. Do you regret it? The affair? Every single day. Not just because of this, he gestured around the visiting room, but because of what it did to your mother, to you, to our family. I was selfish and stupid, and I destroyed everything that mattered. I felt tears building behind my eyes. You destroyed my childhood. Do you know what it was like growing up as the daughter of a murderer? Having to lie about who my father was? Changing my last name? Moving schools? Having no friends because I couldn't anyone get close enough to find out? I know, he said, and his voice broke. God, Meredith, I know, I've thought about it every single day. I would give anything to take it back, to make different choices. But I can't. All I can do is sit here and tell you how sorry I am. Sorry doesn't fix it. No, it doesn't. Nothing can fix it, but it's all I have to give you. We sat there, the weight of 23 years between us, and I realized I was crying. Silent tears rolling down my face, and I couldn't even wipe them away without drawing attention. My father was crying too. This man I barely knew anymore, this stranger who was also my dad, sitting across from me with tears streaming down his face and nothing he could do about it because he couldn't reach across the table, couldn't hug me, couldn't offer any comfort except words. I missed you so much, he said, his voice thick. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. I wondered what you looked like, what kind of person you were becoming. I made up stories in my head about your life, and none of them were as good as this, seeing you here all grown up, successful, strong. I'm not strong. You are. You're here, aren't you? After everything, you came to see me. That takes more strength than you know. A guard announced that visiting hours were almost over. 15 more minutes. Will you come back, my father asked. Or is this it? One visit to satisfy your curiosity and then you disappear? I didn't know how to answer that. I'd come here looking for something, closure maybe, or understanding, but I'd found more questions instead. I don't know, I said. This is all so overwhelming. I need time to process it. I understand. But Meredith, if this is the last time I ever see you, I need you to know something. What? I love you. I have loved you every single day since you were born. And even if you never come back, even if you decide you can't forgive me or can't believe me, or just can't handle having a father in prison, that won't change. You are the best thing I ever did in my life, and I'm so proud of who you've become. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight, my chest too full. 5 minutes, the guard called out. My father stood up slowly. Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me this. I stood too, even though I didn't want to leave, even though there was still so much to say. Dad, I said, and it was the first time I'd called him that in 23 years. His face crumpled when he heard it. Yeah, sweetheart? I'm glad I came. He smiled through his tears. Me too, me too. And then he turned and walked away, back through the door he'd come from, back to whatever cell he lived in, back to his life sentence. I stood there for a moment, watching the door close behind him, and then I walked out too, out through security, out through the parking lot, back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, not moving, just breathing, processing, feeling. Then I called Daniel. Hey, he answered immediately. How did it go? I don't know, I said. I really don't know. Do you want me to come get you? No, I can drive. I just needed to hear your voice. I'm here. I'm right here. We sat in silence for a moment, connected by phone lines and love and years of building a life together. He says he didn't do it, I said finally. Do you believe him? I don't know. But Daniel, what if he's telling the truth? What if he's been in there for 23 years for something he didn't do? Then that would be terrible. That would be one of the worst things I could imagine. What do I do? Whatever you need to do, whatever feels right, I'm with you either way. I closed my eyes, leaned my head back against the seat. I think I need to find out the truth, really find out, not just take his word for it or the court's word for it. I need to know for myself. Okay, Daniel said simply. Then that's what we'll do. I spent the next several weeks obsessed. I pulled every court document I could find, read every news article, tracked down everyone who'd been involved in the case. I contacted Marcus Chen, the law student who ran the website about my father's innocence, and he sent me hundreds of pages of research he'd compiled over the years. Daniel was patient with me. He'd come home from work to find me surrounded by papers, barely aware he'd walked in. He'd make dinner, bring me a plate, kiss the top of my head, and leave me to my research. I learned things about my father's case I'd never known. The timeline was tight. According to the coroner, Rebecca had died between 7:30 and 9 p.m. My father's cell phone records showed he'd received a call from her number at 8:07 p.m. that lasted 3 minutes. He said he'd driven straight to her apartment after that call, which was about a 15-minute drive from our house. So if he was telling the truth, he would have arrived around 8:25 p.m, right in the middle of the window when she could have been killed. But the prosecution had argued that he'd killed her earlier, that the phone call was fabricated or misinterpreted, that the coroner's timeline was approximate, not exact. I tracked down the coroner who'd done Rebecca's autopsy. Dr. Sarah Klein was retired now, living in San Diego. She agreed to talk to me on the phone. I remember that case, she said when I explained who I was. Young woman. Strangulation. Your father was convicted, if I recall correctly. Yes, I'm trying to understand the timeline. The coroner's report said time of death was between 7:30 and 9 p.m. That sounds right. Time of death is never precise, especially several hours after the fact. We use body temperature, rigor mortis, lividity, all of which have ranges, not exact measurements. But is it possible she died closer to 8:30? Possible? Sure. The evidence would be consistent with that. But it would also be consistent with 7:30 or 8 or 8:45. That's the nature of forensic pathology. We give ranges, and juries sometimes treat them like certainties. Did anyone ask you about this at trial? The defense attorney asked me to confirm the range. I did. But the prosecution focused on the idea that your father could have killed her earlier in the window, then called from her phone to establish an alibi. It's actually not an uncommon tactic. I thanked her and hung up, adding this to my growing pile of information. Next, I tried to find information about the other person Rebecca had been seeing, the one she'd mentioned to my father. According to the court transcripts, Rebecca's roommate had mentioned in her testimony that Rebecca had been dating someone new, but she didn't know his name, had never met him. The prosecution had dismissed this as irrelevant. If this other boyfriend existed, they argued, he had no motive. My father was the one Rebecca had just broken up with. But what if the new boyfriend did have a motive? What if Rebecca had tried to break up with him too? What if he was the one who'd been following her? I tracked down Rebecca's old roommate, Jennifer Morrison. She was harder to find. She'd gotten married, changed her name, moved to Portland. But social media is a powerful tool, and I eventually found her. I sent her a message explaining who I was, asking if she'd be willing to talk. I didn't expect a response. It had been over 20 years, and I was asking her to relive a traumatic experience, but she wrote back within a day. I'll talk to you. I've always wondered if they got the right person. We set up a video call for that weekend. When her face appeared on my screen, I saw a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and grey starting to show in her dark hair. "Thank you for agreeing to talk to me," I said. "Of course. I can't imagine how hard this must be for you. Can you tell me about Rebecca? About what was happening in her life before she died?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Rebecca was great," she said finally. "Smart, funny, ambitious. She wanted to be a history professor herself someday. She and your father, I knew about the affair, even though she tried to keep it quiet. I didn't approve, but it wasn't my place to judge." "Did you know she was seeing someone else?" "Sort of. She'd mentioned a few times that she'd met someone, but she was really secretive about it. She wouldn't tell me his name or where they'd met. I got the impression maybe he was married or something, some reason she couldn't be open about it." My heart started beating faster. "Did you tell the police this?" "I mentioned it, yeah. But they didn't seem interested. They were so focused on your father, they had their suspect, their evidence. This mystery boyfriend didn't fit their narrative." "Did Rebecca seem scared before she died? Did she say anything about someone following her?" Jennifer's face changed. "How did you know about that?" "My father said she called him the night she died, said someone had been following her. She told me the same thing, maybe a week before she died. She said she kept seeing this guy around, at the library, outside her favourite coffee shop near the apartment. She thought maybe she was being paranoid, but it was making her nervous." "Did she describe him?" "Not really, just a guy, average looking, but the way she talked about it, she seemed genuinely spooked." "Did you tell the police this too?" "Yes, I told them everything. But again, they weren't interested. They said she was probably just being paranoid, or that it was probably your father she'd seen and was attributing it to some stranger because she felt guilty about the affair." I could feel anger building in my chest. The police had had leads, the mystery boyfriend, the person following Rebecca, and they'd ignored them because they'd already decided my father was guilty. "Jennifer," I said carefully, "do you think my father did it?" She was quiet for a long time. "Honestly, I don't know. The evidence against him was strong, but Rebecca never seemed afraid of him. She talked about ending the affair like it was this mature, mutual decision. If she'd been scared of him, I think she would have told me." "But she told you about the person following her?" "Exactly. She wasn't shy about admitting when she was scared. So why wouldn't she mention if your father was threatening her or scaring her?" After we hung up, I sat staring at my notes. The picture that was emerging was different from the one presented at trial. Not proof of innocence, but reasonable doubt. My father might have been telling the truth. I went to visit him again the following week. This time, I was less nervous, more focused. I had questions, and I needed answers. When he saw me walk into the visiting room, his face lit up in a way that made my chest ache. "You came back," he said, sitting down across from me. "I told you I needed time to think. I've been doing research, looking into your case." His expression became guarded. "What did you find?" "Enough to have questions. Tell me about the person Rebecca said was following her. Did she describe him?" "Not really. Just that it was a man, maybe in his 30s, average height and build. She said she'd seen him 3 or 4 times in places she regularly went. She thought maybe he was a student, but she didn't recognize him." "And you told your lawyer this?" "I did. He said it wasn't enough, that without a description or a name, we couldn't do anything with it. He said the prosecution would argue I'd made it up." I pulled out my notes. Rebecca's roommate confirmed that Rebecca told her the same thing. She also said Rebecca was seeing someone new, someone she was secretive about. My father's face hardened. "The mystery boyfriend. The police refused to investigate him." "Did Rebecca tell you anything about him? Anything that might help identify him?" No, she just said she was seeing someone her own age, someone more appropriate. I got the impression she was trying to spare my feelings by not giving me details. What if he was the one following her? What if she tried to break up with him too and he didn't take it well? That's what I've been saying for 23 years, my father said, frustration creeping into his voice. But no one would listen. The police had their suspect, the married professor having an affair with his student. Why would they look anywhere else? I leaned back in my chair, thinking, what would it take to reopen your case, to get someone to look at this again? New evidence, significant new evidence that wasn't available at trial. But Meredith, that's nearly impossible. It's been over 2 decades. Even if there was evidence, it's probably gone by now. What about the mystery boyfriend? If we could identify him, talk to him. How? We don't even know his name. And even if we found him, what's he going to say? Oh yeah, I killed her? He's not going to incriminate himself. No, but maybe he'd have an alibi. Or maybe he'd say something that didn't add up. Or maybe there are records, phone records, credit card statements, something that proves they were together and might give us a lead. My father looked at me with something like hope mixed with fear. Meredith, I don't want you getting obsessed with this. I don't want you putting your life on hold trying to prove something that might not be provable. You spent 23 years in here. 23 years. If there's even a chance you didn't do it, don't I owe it to you to try? You don't owe me anything. I'm the one who owes you. A childhood, a father, a normal life. Then let me do this. Let me try. He was quiet for a long moment and I could see he was struggling with something. Okay, he said finally. But promise me something. Promise me that if this goes nowhere, if we hit dead ends, you'll let it go. You'll go back to your life, your husband, your career. You'll live, really live, not get stuck in the past like I am. I promise, I said, even though I wasn't sure I meant it. I hired a private investigator. His name was Raymond Foster, and he specialized in cold cases. He was expensive, but Daniel and I had savings, and this felt more important than saving for a new car or a bigger house. Raymond was in his 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened to everything I'd learned, took notes, asked questions. I have to be honest with you, he said when I finished. This is a long shot, really long. Most of the people involved have moved on, evidence has been destroyed, memories have faded. Even if your father is innocent, proving it after all this time is going to be almost impossible. But you'll try? I'll try. But I want you to prepare yourself for the possibility that we won't find anything conclusive. Sometimes the truth stays buried. I understand. He started with Rebecca's phone records from the time of her death. It took weeks to get them. They'd been archived, nearly destroyed, required multiple court orders to access. But Raymond was persistent. When he finally called me with the results, I could hear excitement in his voice. I found something, he said. In the weeks before Rebecca died, there was a number that called her repeatedly, sometimes multiple times a day. I ran it, and it came back to a prepaid cell phone purchased at a convenience store in Sacramento. No name attached. Could it be the mystery boyfriend? Could be. Or could be a friend, a family member, anyone. But here's what's interesting. The last call from that number to Rebecca's phone was at 7:43 p.m. the night she died. It lasted 8 minutes. My heart was pounding. That's before my father called her, before he went to her apartment. Exactly. And get this, I pulled cell tower records. That prepaid phone was pinging off a tower near Rebecca's apartment when the call was made. So someone called her from near her apartment, talked to her for 8 minutes is right before she died. Right before the window when she died, Raymond corrected. We can't prove causation, but it's interesting. Can we trace the phone? Find out who bought it? I'm working on it. The convenience store from 2002 is long gone, but I'm trying to track down the owner, see if they kept any records. It's a long shot, but I'm trying. Over the next several months, Raymond dug deeper. He interviewed people who'd known Rebecca, tracked down her old professors, her friends, anyone who might remember something about the mystery boyfriend. Most people's memories had faded. 23 years is a long time. But a few remembered small details. Rebecca mentioning a guy named Mike or Matt, something with an M. Someone who worked in tech, maybe. Someone who drove a blue car. Small pieces that might mean nothing or might mean everything. I visited my father regularly through all of this. Once a month, sometimes more. We talked about the investigation, but we also talked about other things, my work, his life in prison, books we'd read, memories from when I was little. Slowly, carefully, we were building a relationship. Not the father-daughter relationship we'd had when I was 11, but something new, something shaped by loss and time and the barriers between us. Daniel came with me once. I'd asked him if he wanted to meet my father, and after some hesitation, he'd agreed. Watching them talk was surreal. My husband and my father making small talk in a prison visiting room. Daniel was polite but reserved. My father was grateful but careful, both of them trying to navigate this strange situation. Afterward in the car, Daniel was quiet. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "I don't know what I expected," he said slowly. "But he seems normal, like just a regular guy, not like a murderer." Murderers don't have a specific look. I know, but still. I guess part of me expected to feel something: fear, disgust, anger. But I just felt sad. Sad that this is his life. Sad that you lost him. Sad that we'll probably never know the whole truth. I reached over and took his hand. "Thank you for coming with me. I know this is weird and complicated and not what you signed up for when you married me. I signed up for you. All of you, including the weird and complicated parts." I loved him so much in that moment it hurt. 6 months into the investigation, Raymond called with news. "I found him," he said. "The mystery boyfriend. Or at least, I think I did." "Who is he?" "His name is Matthew Carlson. He was a software engineer at a startup in Sacramento in 2002. I tracked him down through old social media posts. Someone had tagged him in a photo from around that time, and in the comments there was a reference to that girl from college who broke his heart. I followed the thread, and it led me to Rebecca." "Where is he now?" "San Jose? He's a senior engineer at a tech company, married with 2 kids. By all accounts, he's a normal, successful guy." "Have you talked to him?" "Not yet. I wanted to check with you first. How do you want to handle this?" I thought about it. If Matthew Carlson was innocent, this could destroy his life. Having someone dig up his relationship with a murdered woman from over 20 years ago. But if he was guilty, if he'd let my father rot in prison for something he'd done? "I want to talk to him myself," I said. "Are you sure?" "I can handle it." "I'm sure." Raymond gave me Matthew's contact information, and I spent a week trying to decide what to say. Finally, I just called him one evening before I could talk myself out of it. "Hello?" A man's voice. Pleasant, unsuspecting. "Is this Matthew Carlson?" "Yes." "Who's this?" "My name is Meredith Calloway. I'm calling about Rebecca Hartwell." There was a long pause. "Then, I don't know anyone by that name." "I think you do. You were dating her in 2002, right before she died." Another pause, longer this time. "How did you get this number? What is this about?" My father is in prison for her murder. I'm trying to find out what really happened that night." "Your father is James Mitchell?" Not a question, a statement. "Yes." "Look, I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish by calling me, but I had nothing to do with Rebecca's death. I talked to the police back then. I told them everything I knew. Your father killed her." "Did you?" "Talk to the police, I mean." He hesitated. "I talked to a detective. I told him I'd been seeing Rebecca, that we'd broken up a few weeks before she died. He said they'd be in touch if they needed more information, but they never called back." "You broke up with her, or she broke up with you?" "What does it matter?" "It matters to me. My father has been in prison for 23 years. If there's any chance he didn't do it." "He did it." "I'm sorry, I know he's your father, but he did it. Everyone knows he did it." "What if you're wrong?" "I'm not wrong. Look, I'm sorry for what you've been through, but I can't help you. Don't call me again." He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, my hands shaking. Something about that conversation felt off. The way he'd hesitated, the way he'd been so defensive. I called Raymond. "I talked to Matthew Carlson." "And?" "He says he had nothing to do with it, that he talked to the police, that my father is guilty. But Raymond, something felt wrong. He was too defensive, too quick to hang up." "Did he say which detective he talked to?" "No, just that it was a detective." "Why?" "Because I've been going through the police files. There's no record of them ever interviewing a Matthew Carlson or anyone matching his description. They interviewed Rebecca's roommate, her professors, some friends, but no mention of a boyfriend. My heart started racing. So, he lied. He never talked to the police. Seems like it. Question is, why? If he had nothing to hide, why lie about talking to the police? Because he has something to hide. Maybe. Or maybe he's just scared. Maybe he doesn't want to get dragged into this after all these years. Being associated with a murder case, even as a witness, could damage his reputation, his career, his marriage. What do we do now? Now I dig deeper. I'm going to find out everything I can about Matthew Carlson, where he was the night Rebecca died, if he has an alibi, if there's any connection between him and her death besides their relationship. Be careful, I said. If he did do it, if he's gotten away with it for 23 years, he might not react well to someone digging around. I'm always careful, Raymond said, but I could hear the excitement in his voice. After months of dead ends and faded memories, we finally had something real. It took Raymond 3 more months to put together Matthew Carlson's timeline for the night. Rebecca died. He pulled credit card records, interviewed Matthew's old co-workers, tracked down anyone who might remember where Matthew was that night. The picture that emerged was interesting. Matthew claimed he'd been at home that night, alone, watching TV. He'd told his friends the same thing back in 2002 when they'd heard about Rebecca's death. No alibi, but no one thought he needed one. The police had quickly focused on my father and stopped looking at anyone else. But Raymond found something the police had missed. Matthew's credit card had been used at a gas station 3 blocks from Rebecca's apartment at 7:52 p.m. the night she died. He was there, Raymond said when he called to tell me. He was at that gas station at that time, less than a 10-minute walk from Rebecca's apartment. Does that prove he killed her? No, but it proves he lied about being home alone, and it puts him at the scene during the window when she died. That's not enough for the police to reopen the case, is it? Probably not on its own, but it's something. It's more than we had before. I asked Raymond to set up another meeting with Matthew, but this time I wanted to confront him with what we knew. Raymond advised against it. If he's guilty, confronting him could be dangerous, and if he's innocent, you could be accusing an innocent man of murder, which could have legal consequences. So what do? We take this to a lawyer, someone who specializes in wrongful convictions. Let them assess whether we have enough for an appeal or a motion to reopen the case. I found a lawyer through the Innocence Project, a woman named Patricia Hammond, who'd successfully overturned 3 wrongful convictions in California. She agreed to look at my father's case. I brought her everything we'd found, the phone records, the cell tower data, Jennifer's testimony about Rebecca being followed, Matthew Carlson's credit card receipt, his lie about talking to the police. She spent 2 weeks reviewing everything. Then she called me into her office. I'm going to be straight with you, she said. This case is complicated. You found some interesting things. The prepaid phone, Matthew Carlson's presence near the scene, but none of it definitively proves your father's innocence. My heart sank. So we can't do anything? I didn't say that. I think we have enough for a hearing. We can petition the court to reopen the case based on newly discovered evidence. The judge will decide if it's enough to warrant a new trial or further investigation. What are our chances? Honestly, 50-50, maybe less. Courts are reluctant to overturn old convictions. The bar for newly discovered evidence is high, but it's worth trying. Then let's try. Patricia filed the motion in March. We had a hearing scheduled for June. 3 months of waiting, hoping, preparing. I told my father about it during one of my visits. He listened quietly, his face unreadable. You really think this could work? He asked when I finished. I don't know, but it's a chance. It's more than we've had in 23 years. And if it doesn't work, if the judge denies the motion, then at least we tried. At least we know we did everything we could. He was quiet for a long time. I don't want you to get your hopes up, sweetheart. I've been through this before. Appeals, motions, lawyers who thought they could help. They all failed. I don't want you to go through that disappointment. I'm not doing this just for you. I'm doing it for me too. I need to know the truth. I need to know if the man I've been grieving for 23 years is a murderer or a victim. What if I am a murderer? What if the truth is exactly what everyone's been saying all along? I looked at him across that table, this man who'd written to me for over 2 decades, who'd never stopped hoping I'd forgive him. Then I'll deal with that, but I don't think you are. And I need to prove it, not just believe it. The hearing was on a Tuesday in June. The courtroom was old, wood-panelled, with high ceilings and windows that let in slants of dusty light. My father was brought in wearing prison blues and handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the formality of the proceedings. Daniel sat beside me in the gallery, holding my hand. Raymond was there too, ready to testify if needed. Patricia stood at the defence table, organised and confident. The prosecutor, a different one from my father's original trial, younger, with slick hair and an expensive suit, argued against reopening the case. He said the evidence was circumstantial at best, that Matthew Carlson's presence near the scene didn't prove anything, that the prepaid phone could have belonged to anyone. The jury heard all the relevant evidence 23 years ago, he said. They deliberated carefully and found the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Nothing presented today changes that fundamental fact. Patricia countered that the jury hadn't heard about Matthew Carlson or the prepaid phone or the person following Rebecca because the police had never investigated those leads. The defence is not claiming that this new evidence proves Mr. Mitchell's innocence beyond all doubt, she said. We're simply asking for the opportunity to present this evidence to a jury, to allow them to consider whether it raises reasonable doubt about his guilt. The judge, an older woman with grey hair and reading glasses, listened carefully, taking notes, occasionally asking questions. Finally, she called a recess to review the evidence and consider her decision. We waited in the hallway outside the courtroom. Patricia was calm, professional. Daniel got us coffee from a vending machine that we didn't drink. Raymond paced, checking his phone, looking at his notes. My father was taken back to a holding cell. I couldn't see him, couldn't talk to him, could only wait. After 2 hours, we were called back in. The judge took her seat, arranged her papers, and looked out at the courtroom. I've reviewed the evidence presented today, she began, and I've considered the arguments from both sides carefully. This is not an easy decision. On one hand, the defendant was convicted by a jury of his peers over 2 decades ago, and courts must respect the finality of those judgments. On the other hand, the criminal justice system must also be willing to correct its mistakes when new evidence comes to light. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear her. The evidence presented today, the phone records, the witness statements about Rebecca Hartwell being followed, Matthew Carlson's presence near the scene and his apparent misrepresentation to investigators, does not, in my view, definitively prove the defendant's innocence. However, it does raise questions that I believe should have been explored more thoroughly during the original investigation. She paused, looked at my father. Therefore, I am granting the motion to reopen this case. I am ordering the District Attorney's Office to conduct a new investigation into Rebecca Hartwell's death, taking into account the evidence presented today. Depending on the results of that investigation, we will determine whether a new trial is warranted. The courtroom erupted. The prosecutor stood up, objecting. Patricia was smiling. I heard myself make a sound, half laugh, half sob. My father sat very still, his face blank with shock. The judge banged her gavel. Order. This does not mean the defendant is released or exonerated. He will remain in custody pending the results of the investigation. Court is adjourned. As they led my father out, he turned and looked at me. Our eyes met, and I saw something I hadn't seen in all my visits. Hope. Real, fragile hope. The new investigation took 6 months. 6 long months during which I barely slept, barely ate, just waited for news. The District Attorney's Office was thorough. They re-interviewed witnesses, brought in new forensic experts, tracked down everyone they could find who'd known Rebecca, and they focused heavily on Matthew Carlson. I didn't know all the details. Patricia said it was better if I didn't, that it might compromise the case. But I knew they'd interviewed him multiple times, pulled his financial records, talked to his wife, his co-workers, his friends. Matthew hired a lawyer. That told me something right there. Innocent people don't usually hire lawyers when the police want to talk to them about an old case they have nothing to do with. In November, 8 months after the hearing, Patricia called me. They found something, she said, and I could hear excitement in her voice. When they re-interviewed Matthew Carlson and pressed him harder, he changed his story. He admitted he was at Rebecca's apartment that night. What? He says he went there to try to convince her to take him back. They'd broken up, but he wasn't ready to let go. He says they argued, she told him to leave, and he did. He says she was alive when he left. Do they believe him? The investigators are skeptical. They're looking into whether there's any forensic evidence linking him to the crime scene. They're also trying to track down the prepaid phone. If it was his, that would be significant. What happens now? We wait. They're still investigating. But Meredith, this is good. This is really good. At minimum, it shows there was another viable suspect the original investigation ignored. 2 weeks later, there was another development. The investigators had managed to trace the prepaid phone through old store inventory records and surveillance footage from the convenience store. The quality was terrible. It was 23-year-old security tape, but they'd enhanced it as much as they could. The person who bought the phone matched Matthew Carlson's general description. It wasn't definitive, you couldn't see his face clearly, but combined with everything else, it was damning. Patricia filed a motion for a new trial based on all the new evidence. The prosecutor's office fought it, but half-heartedly. I got the sense they knew they were fighting a losing battle. In January, almost a year after our first hearing, the judge granted the motion. My father would get a new trial. The trial was scheduled for April. Patricia assembled a team, a forensic expert, a private investigator, a jury consultant. She said we had a real shot at acquittal, but nothing was guaranteed. Juries are unpredictable, she warned me, and your father did have an affair with the victim, did go to her apartment, did run from the scene. Even with all the evidence pointing to Matthew Carlson, some jurors might still think your father is guilty. But what about reasonable doubt? Isn't that the standard? It is. But sometimes juries convict despite reasonable doubt because they want someone to pay for the crime. We have to make sure they understand that convicting the wrong person doesn't bring justice. It compounds the tragedy. I visited my father more frequently in the months leading up to the trial. He was different now, more alert, more engaged. Hope had given him something to live for after years of resignation. Whatever happens, he told me during one visit, I want you to know how much these last 2 years have meant to me. Getting to know you again, seeing the woman you've become, having you believe in me, that's more than I ever thought I'd have. You're going to get out, I said. You're going to walk out of here a free man, and we're going to have a real relationship. We're going to make up for lost time. Don't, he said gently. Don't pin all your hopes on that. Even if I'm acquitted, I've lost 24 years. I can't get those back. And you've built a life without me. I don't want to disrupt that. You won't be disrupting it. You'll be joining it. He smiled, but it was sad. We'll see. The trial began on a Monday in April. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, curious onlookers, people who remembered the original case. My father sat at the defense table in a suit Patricia had brought him. He looked strange in civilian clothes after all these years. I sat in the front row with Daniel, holding his hand so tightly my fingers ached. The prosecution's case was essentially the same as the original trial. My father's DNA, his fingerprints, his relationship with Rebecca, his flight from the scene. But Patricia systematically dismantled each point. Yes, my father's DNA was at the scene, but he'd been in a relationship with Rebecca. It would have been unusual if his DNA wasn't there. Yes, his fingerprints were at the scene, but he admitted to being there, to finding her body. Yes, he'd had a relationship with Rebecca, but so had Matthew Carlson, and unlike my father, Matthew had lied about his whereabouts that night. And yes, my father had run from the scene, but not, Patricia argued, because he was guilty, but because he was terrified. He was a black man found at the scene of a white woman's murder. He panicked, made a terrible decision, but that didn't make him a killer. The prosecution tried to argue that Matthew Carlson's presence near the scene didn't prove anything, that he'd explained why he was there, that there was no evidence linking him to the actual murder. But Patricia had an ace. She called a forensic expert who'd re-examined evidence from the original crime scene using modern techniques. Under Rebecca's fingernails mixed with my father's DNA, they'd found traces of DNA from a second person. The original investigation had missed it because the techniques in 2002 weren't sensitive enough to separate out the mixed sample. But now with advanced testing, they could, and that second DNA sample matched Matthew Carlson. The courtroom went silent when the expert testified to this. I saw the prosecutor's face fall. I saw the jury lean forward, paying attention. Patricia drove the point home. Matthew Carlson's DNA was under Rebecca Hartwell's fingernails. He was near her apartment the night she died. He lied about talking to the police. He bought a prepaid phone that was used to call Rebecca shortly before her death. And yet the original investigation never seriously considered him as a suspect because they were so focused on James Mitchell. She paused, looked at the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, the question before you is not whether James Mitchell made mistakes. He did. He had an affair. He went to Rebecca's apartment. He panicked and ran. These were mistakes. Serious mistakes, but they don't make him a murderer. The question before you is whether the prosecution has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that James Mitchell killed Rebecca Hartwell. And when you consider all the evidence, not just the evidence that points to Mr. Mitchell, but the evidence that points to Matthew Carlson, I don't think they have. I don't think they've come close. The prosecution's closing argument tried to cast doubt on the DNA evidence, suggested it could have gotten there innocently, that Matthew and Rebecca had been dating, so of course his DNA might be present. But it felt weak. The jury could see it was weak. They deliberated for 2 days. 2 days of sitting in that courthouse, waiting, hoping, terrified. Daniel brought me food I couldn't eat. Patricia checked in regularly, tried to read the tea leaves of how long deliberations were taking, what questions the jury had asked. 2 days is good, she said. If they were going to convict, they probably would have done it faster. The fact that they're taking their time means they're really considering everything. On the 3rd day, we got word that the jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom. My father was brought in, and he looked grey, exhausted. I tried to catch his eye to give him some encouragement, but he was staring straight ahead. The judge asked if the jury had reached a verdict. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with glasses, stood. "We have, Your Honour. What say you? On the charge of murder in the 2nd degree, we find the defendant not guilty." The courtroom erupted. People were shouting, crying, gasping. I heard myself scream, felt Daniel grab me as my knees buckled. My father stood very still for a moment, like he couldn't quite process what he'd heard. Then he turned and looked at me, and I saw his face crumple. The judge was banging her gavel, calling for order, but I couldn't hear her over the roaring in my ears. Not guilty. After 24 years, not guilty. They took my father back to process his release. Patricia said it would take a few hours, paperwork, returning his personal effects, officially closing his case file. Daniel and I waited in the courthouse lobby, surrounded by reporters who wanted a statement, curious onlookers, other people from the trial. I didn't talk to anyone. I just sat there, numb, trying to comprehend that it was over. 4 hours later, my father walked out of the courthouse, a free man. He stood on the steps, blinking in the afternoon sunlight. He was still wearing the suit Patricia had brought him, but he looked different somehow, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. I ran to him, ran like I hadn't run since I was a child, and threw my arms around him. He held me tight, and we both cried, huge, gasping sobs that shook both of us. "I can't believe it," he kept saying. "I can't believe it's real." "It's real, Dad, you're free. You're really free." We stood there for a long time, holding each other, while reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed and the world moved around us. Finally, we pulled apart. My father looked around, taking in the street, the buildings, the people walking by. "Everything looks different," he said. "Brighter. Like someone turned up the contrast on the world." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "Where do you want to go?" He thought about it. "I don't know. I haven't thought past this moment. What do free people do?" Daniel stepped forward, offered his hand. "They go home. Come stay with us, at least for tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." My father shook his hand, and I saw tears in his eyes again. "Thank you, both of you. I don't know how to thank you enough. You don't have to thank us, I said. You're my father. This is what family does. The first few weeks of my father's freedom were strange and wonderful and difficult all at once. Everything was overwhelming for him. The grocery store had too many choices. The internet was confusing. His phone, we got him a basic smartphone, might as well have been alien technology. He marveled at things I took for granted. Streaming movies, GPS navigation, how much things cost, how people dressed, how the world had changed in 24 years. But slowly he adjusted. We helped him get a driver's license, open a bank account, find a small apartment. The state gave him a settlement for wrongful conviction, not nearly enough to compensate for 24 years of his life, but something. Patricia connected him with resources for exonerees, therapy, job training, support groups. He attended regularly, grateful to be around other people who understood what he'd been through, and we spent time together. A lot of time. We had 24 years to catch up on, and we tried to compress it into every moment we could. He met my friends, saw where I worked, came to dinner parties at our house. He was quiet at first, uncertain of how to navigate social situations after so long in prison. But gradually he found his footing. You turned out so well, he told me one evening. We were sitting on my back porch watching the sunset, drinking coffee. Despite everything, despite me, you became this amazing person. Not despite you, I said. Partly because of you. You never gave up. You wrote to me for 23 years, even when you thought I'd never read the letters. That kind of persistence, that kind of love, I learned that from you. I missed so much of your life. I know, we both did, but we can't change that. All we can do is move forward. He was quiet for a moment. What happened to Matthew Carlson? Did they charge him? I nodded. They arrested him 2 weeks after your trial ended. He's been charged with second-degree murder. His trial is scheduled for next year. How do you feel about that? Angry, sad. He stole 24 years from you. He let you sit in prison for something he did. And for what? Because Rebecca broke up with him? People do terrible things when they feel rejected, when they feel like they're losing control. That doesn't excuse it. No, it doesn't. But hating him won't give me back those years. All I can do is try to make the most of however many years I have left. We sat in silence, watching the last rays of sun disappear below the horizon. I'm proud of you, my father said suddenly, for not giving up on me, for believing in me when everyone else said I was guilty. That took courage. Mom lied to me, I said, the words surprising me even as I said them. For 23 years she lied, and I'm so angry at her for that. But I also understand why she did it. She thought she was protecting me. She was protecting herself too, my father said. What I did, the affair, the betrayal that destroyed her. Maybe keeping us apart was the only way she could cope with the pain. Do you forgive her? He thought about it for a long time. I don't know. Some days yes, some days no. But I'm trying. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. 6 months after my father's release, we went back to our old house, the one we'd lived in before he was arrested, the one my mother had sold all those years ago. I tracked down the current owners, explained who I was, asked if we could visit. They were kind, said of course, that they'd heard about the case and were glad my father had been freed. We pulled up to the familiar white house with the blue shutters, and I saw my father's hands tighten on the steering wheel. You okay? I asked. It's just, I never thought I'd see this place again. The owners gave us a tour. The house had been renovated. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, different paint colours. But the bones were the same. My father stood in what used to be his study, now converted into a home office, and I saw him touch the wall like he was trying to connect with a memory. I was working in here when the police came, he said quietly. Working on my dissertation. I'd been so close to finishing. I thought I had my whole life ahead of me, tenure-track position, book deals, growing old with your mother, and then in one night, it all disappeared. I'm sorry, I said, even though sorry felt inadequate. Don't be. What happened, happened. I can't change it, but I can choose how I move forward. We walked through the rest of the house, and when we got to my old bedroom, now a nursery for the current owner's baby, I felt tears sting my eyes. I was happy here, I said. Before everything happened, I was so happy. I felt safe and loved and like nothing bad could ever touch us. I know, I'm sorry I took that away from you. You didn't take it away. The situation did, the affair, the murder, the lies, all of it, but you didn't choose any of that. We stood in my old room, surrounded by someone else's life, and I realised something. I'd been carrying this grief for 24 years. Grief for my father, grief for my childhood, grief for the life we should have had. But maybe it was time to let it go. Not to forget, but to release. To stop letting the past define every choice I made. I forgive you, I said suddenly. For the affair, for going to her apartment, for running, for all of it, I forgive you. My father looked at me, tears streaming down his face. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. But I want to. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of grieving. I just want to be your daughter again. He pulled me into a hug and we stood there crying in my old bedroom, finally releasing decades of pain. A year after my father's release, Daniel and I decided to try for a baby. We'd been talking about it before everything happened with my father's case, but we'd put it on hold during the trial and the adjustment period after. Now it felt like the right time. I got pregnant quickly, and when I told my father he was going to be a grandfather, he cried. I never thought to get to experience this, he said. I'd accepted that I'd never see you get married, never meet your children, never be part of your life in any real way. Well, now you are. And this baby is going to know their grandfather. They're going to hear stories about you, spend time with you, love you. What if I don't know how? I missed your entire childhood. What if I've forgotten how to be around kids? You'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together. My daughter, we named her Eleanor Rose, after both of our mothers, was born on a cold January morning. My father was at the hospital, pacing in the waiting room with Daniel's parents, nervous and excited. When they brought Eleanor out and placed her in my arms, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. This tiny person, this perfect combination of me and Daniel, this new beginning. They let my father come in after a few minutes. He approached slowly, like he was afraid of breaking something, and when he saw Eleanor, his face transformed. She's perfect, he whispered. Absolutely perfect. Do you want to hold her? Can I? I placed Eleanor in his arms, and I watched my father hold his granddaughter for the first time, watched him look down at her with such love, such wonder, such gratitude for this second chance. Hi, little one, he said softly. I'm your grandpa. I have so many stories to tell you, so much time to make up for, but we'll get there. We have time now. And in that moment, looking at my father holding my daughter, I realized something. We'd lost so much. Decades of time, memories we'd never get back, a childhood that had been cut short. But we'd also gained something. We'd fought for each other. We'd refused to give up. We'd found truth in a system designed to hide it. And now we had this. This moment, this baby, this chance to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. Matthew Carlson was convicted of Rebecca Hartwell's murder 18 months after my father's acquittal. The trial was swift. The evidence against him was overwhelming once investigators actually looked at him as a suspect. He was sentenced to 25 years to life, the same sentence my father had served. I didn't go to his trial. I didn't need to see him punished to feel closure. Justice for my father didn't require vengeance against Matthew Carlson. It just required truth. But I thought about Rebecca sometimes, the young woman whose death had set all of this in motion. She'd been 22 years old, with dreams and plans and a whole life ahead of her. Matthew Carlson had stolen that from her, and then he'd let my father pay the price. I hoped, wherever Rebecca was, she had peace now. That knowing her real killer had been caught brought her some measure of rest. My father struggled sometimes, with nightmares about prison, with anxiety in crowds, with the lost years he could never get back. He saw a therapist regularly, attended his support group, took medication for PTSD, but he was also happy. Really, genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen him before. He found joy in small things, coffee with friends, walks in the park, watching Eleanor learn to crawl, then walk, then run. I don't take anything for granted anymore, he told me once. Every day I wake up free, every moment I spend with you and Eleanor, every ordinary Tuesday, it's all a gift. I spent 24 years thinking I'd die in prison. Now I get to live. On Eleanor's second birthday, we had a party at our house. Daniel's family came, some friends, my father, his girlfriend Linda, a woman he'd met at his support group who'd also been wrongfully convicted and exonerated. I watched my father blow up balloons with Eleanor, watched him laugh at her messy attempts to eat cake, watched him take pictures with his phone. Technology he'd finally mastered. And I thought about the shoebox of letters I'd found in my mother's attic. The letters that had changed everything. I still had them stored carefully in my closet. Sometimes I'd take them out and read them, reminding myself of how far we'd come. Of how persistence and love and refusal to accept injustice could change everything. My mother had tried to protect me by keeping those letters hidden. But in the end, they'd saved us. They'd shown me that my father had never stopped reaching out, never stopped loving me, never stopped hoping, and that knowledge had given me the courage to fight for him. Eleanor was 4 years old when she asked me about prison. We were reading a book that mentioned someone being in jail, and she looked up at me with curious eyes. "What's prison, Mommy?" I glanced at Daniel, who was sitting next to us. He gave me a small nod, encouraging me to answer honestly. "Prison is where people go when they've done something wrong," I said carefully. "It's like a really long time out." "Has anyone we know been to prison?" I took a breath. "Yes, Grandpa James was in prison for a very long time." Her eyes got wide. "Grandpa? Why? Was he bad?" "No, sweetheart, Grandpa wasn't bad. Sometimes the system makes mistakes, and people go to prison even when they didn't do anything wrong. That's what happened to Grandpa. But we fought really hard, and we proved he shouldn't have been there, and now he's free." She thought about this, her little face serious. "That's not fair." "No, it's not. But we fixed it, and now Grandpa gets to be with us." "I'm glad we fixed it," she said firmly. "I love Grandpa." "Me too, baby. Me too." Later that night, after Eleanor was asleep, my father called. "Eleanor told me you talked to her about prison," he said. "Thank you for being honest with her. She deserved to know, and she's old enough to understand, at least a little bit. What if kids at school find out? What if they treat her differently because of me? Then we'll deal with it. But Dad, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You didn't do anything wrong, and I'm not going to hide you or pretend you don't exist just because narrow-minded people might judge. You're a good mother, Meredith. A better mother than I was a father. You were a good father. You are a good father. You just had 24 years stolen from you. That's not your fault." We talked for a while longer, about nothing and everything. Eleanor's upcoming recital, his plans to take a class at the community college, Linda's daughter's wedding next month. Ordinary conversations about ordinary life. The kind of conversations we'd been denied for so long. When we hung up, I sat in the quiet house, Daniel asleep upstairs, and thought about forgiveness. I'd forgiven my father. I'd even, in a way, forgiven my mother. I understood now that she'd done what she thought was right, even if it was wrong. But the hardest person to forgive had been myself. For all the years I'd believed the lie, for not questioning it sooner, for letting anger and shame shape my life, for not fighting for my father until my mother was dead and I found those letters. But I was learning to forgive that too. To understand that I'd been a child when this started. That I'd done the best I could with the information I had. That finding the truth when I did was better than never finding it at all. We're all just doing the best we can with what we know, and sometimes we get a chance to make things right. Not to erase the past, but to build a better future. That's what we were doing now, building something new from the broken pieces. 5 years after my father's release, he walked Eleanor down the aisle at my sister's wedding. Wait, I should explain. I don't have a sister, but Linda did. Linda's daughter Emily asked if my father would walk her down the aisle because her own father had passed away years before. My father was honoured and terrified. He practised for weeks, worried he'd trip, that he'd mess up his part in the ceremony, that he'd somehow ruin Emily's special day. But when the moment came, he was perfect. He walked slowly, steadily, Emily's hand on his arm, both of them smiling through tears. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" my father answered in a clear, strong voice, "Her mother and I do." I cried watching it. Cried for all the moments my father had missed. My own wedding, birthdays, graduations, but also cried with gratitude that he was here now, that he got to experience this, that he'd been given a second chance at life. After the ceremony, during the reception, my father and I danced together. A father-daughter dance we'd never had at my own wedding. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for yours," he said as we swayed to the music. "You were there in spirit," I said. "And besides, we're here now. That's what matters." "Do you ever regret it? Spending so much time and energy fighting for me? You could have just left me there, moved on with your life." "Never, not for a single second. You're my father, and the years we've had since you got out, they've been some of the best of my life." "Mine too," he said. "Every single day feels like a gift." The song ended, and we hugged, and I realised something. I'd spent so much of my life defined by what I'd lost, my father, my childhood, my innocence, but now I was defined by what I'd found. Truth, justice, family, love that persisted despite every obstacle. I'm 42 now, my father is 70. Eleanor is 8, and we have a son too, James Daniel, named after both his grandfather and his father. He's 5. My father teaches history online now for a community college. He never got to finish his dissertation all those years ago, but he found a way back to his passion. He and Linda got married last year, a small ceremony in our backyard with just family. Eleanor and James were in the wedding party, so excited to dress up and be part of something special. We have Sunday dinners together. All of us, me, Daniel, the kids, my father, Linda, and Linda's daughter Emily and her husband. We've built this family from broken pieces, and it's imperfect and complicated and beautiful. Sometimes I think about my mother. I wonder what she would think of all this. If she'd be happy that we found each other again, or angry that I'd uncovered her lies. I like to think she'd be happy, that underneath all the pain and anger and protective instincts, she'd want me to have a relationship with my father, that she'd want me to know the truth. But I'll never know for sure, and I've made peace with that. I still have the shoebox of letters. I've read them to my father, the ones he wrote when I was a teenager, when I was in my 20s, when I got married. All the moments he imagined and wondered about and missed. "I was so wrong about so many things," he said when we finished reading through them. "I imagined you doing all these things, going all these places, and your real life was so much better than anything I could have imagined." "You were right about one thing," I said. "You wrote in one of your letters that you hoped I'd be happy, and I am, really, truly happy. That's all I ever wanted for you." We talk about the past sometimes, but mostly we live in the present. We watch Eleanor's soccer games and James's t-ball practices. We go to movies and museums and the beach. We have pancakes on Sunday mornings and movie nights on Fridays. We live the ordinary life that was stolen from us for so long, and every single day, I'm grateful. Grateful that I found those letters. Grateful that I had the courage to investigate. Grateful that the truth came out, even after 24 years. Grateful that I learned how to breathe again. Last week, Eleanor asked me a question while I was tucking her into bed. "Mom, why did you fight so hard for Grandpa? When everyone said he was bad, why did you believe him?" I thought about how to answer, how to explain something so complicated to an 8-year-old. Because love isn't about believing someone is perfect, I said finally. It's about believing in them even when everything seems impossible. Grandpa wrote to me for 23 years, even though he never got letters back. He never stopped loving me, never stopped hoping. How could I do any less for him? "I want to be brave like you when I grow up," she said sleepily. "You're already brave, sweetheart, braver than you know." After she fell asleep, I stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. This beautiful child who would grow up knowing her father, who would never have to wonder if he loved her, who would have the relationship with him that I'd been denied for so long. We can't erase the past. We can't get back the years that were lost. But we can choose what we do with the time we have left. We can choose truth over comfortable lies. We can choose to fight even when the odds seem impossible. We can choose to believe in love and justice and the possibility of redemption, and we can choose to breathe, really breathe, deeply and fully, taking in all the pain and joy and complexity of being alive. That's what I've learned from all of this. Life is messy and unfair and sometimes cruel, but it's also beautiful and surprising and full of second chances. My father lost 24 years of his life to a crime he didn't commit. That's a tragedy that can never be fully repaired. But he also gained something, the knowledge that his daughter loved him enough to fight for him. That truth matters. That justice, however delayed, can still come. And I gained something too, a father, a family. The understanding that the stories we tell ourselves about our lives aren't always true, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is being willing to question everything we think we know. It's been 10 years since I found those letters in my mother's attic. 10 years since I discovered that my father had never stopped reaching out, never stopped hoping, never stopped loving me. 10 years since my life split into before and after. I don't regret any of it. Not the investigation, not the trial and hard work of rebuilding a relationship with a man I barely knew anymore. Because at the end of all of it, I have my father back. And that's worth everything. On quiet nights, when the house is still and everyone else is asleep, I sometimes take out those letters and read them again. I run my fingers over my father's handwriting, carefully preserved despite decades in a shoebox in an attic. And I remember that day I found them. Remember the feeling of the world tilting, of everything I thought I knew revealing itself to be a lie. It would have been easier to put them back, to leave them hidden, to continue living with the comfortable fiction my mother had created. But I chose truth instead. I chose the hard path, the uncertain path, the path that required courage and faith and an unwillingness to accept injustice. And that choice gave me back my father. There are moments now, ordinary moments, that take my breath away with their simple perfection. Like last Tuesday when I came home from work to find my father in the backyard with James, teaching him how to identify different types of leaves. Both of them were crouched down in the grass, my father's patient voice explaining the difference between an oak and a maple, James's little hands carefully touching each leaf like it was treasure. "Grandpa knows everything," James said proudly when he saw me. My father looked up and smiled, and I saw in his face the ghost of the man he'd been before. The professor, the teacher, the father who'd helped me with my homework in front of the fireplace all those years ago. He'd never stopped being that man. Prison hadn't taken that from him, even though it had taken so much else. Or like this morning when Eleanor asked if Grandpa could come to career day at her school. "I want to tell everyone that my grandpa is a survivor," she said, "that he was in prison even though he didn't do anything wrong, and that my mom saved him." "I didn't save him," I told her. "We saved each other. My father comes to our house for dinner almost every night now. Linda jokes that they should just move in with us, save on groceries, but I think my father needs his own space, his own apartment, where he can be alone when the memories get too heavy. He still has nightmares, still wakes up sometimes thinking he's back in his cell, still flinches at loud noises. 24 years of trauma doesn't just disappear because you've been exonerated, but he's healing. Slowly, gradually, he's learning to live in the world again. Last month, we went to a museum together, just the two of us, a father-daughter outing. We walked through exhibits about ancient civilizations, and my father would stop and read every placard, absorb every detail. "I used to dream about places like this," he said as we stood in front of an Egyptian sarcophagus. "In prison, I'd close my eyes and imagine walking through museums, libraries, universities, places full of knowledge and beauty. It kept me sane." "Do you ever think about writing?" I asked. "About your experience? So many people could learn from your story." "Maybe someday. Right now, I'm still living it, still figuring out what it all means." He paused, looked at me. "But if I ever do write it, you'll be the hero. The daughter who refused to give up, who fought against an entire system to prove the truth." "I'm not a hero. I just loved you." "That's what makes you a hero," he said quietly. We stood there together in that museum, surrounded by artifacts from civilizations long dead, and I thought about time, how it moves forward relentlessly, how we can't stop it or reverse it or get back what we've lost. But we can make meaning from what remains. We can take broken pieces and build something new. We can refuse to let injustice have the final word. Daniel and I are thinking about buying a bigger house, something with a guest room for my father, a bigger yard for the kids, space to grow. "I never imagined this," he told me last night as we were looking at listings online. "When we met, You were so closed off, so afraid of letting anyone in. And now look at us, thinking about a house big enough for your dad to stay over, building this big, messy, complicated family. Are you happy? I asked. With how things turned out? This isn't what you signed up for when we got married. I'm happier than I ever thought possible, he said, pulling me close. Your father is a good man. Your kids adore him. And watching you fight for him, watching you refuse to accept the easy answer, it made me love you even more. Even when I was obsessed, when I could barely think about anything else. Even then, especially then, you showed me what real love looks like, not the romantic comedy version, but the kind that shows up and does the hard work even when it's painful and uncertain. I kissed him, grateful for this man who'd stood beside me through everything, who'd never asked me to choose between him and my father, who'd welcomed my father into our lives without reservation. We're going to need a bigger Christmas tree too, he said, looking back at the house listings. For all the stockings. I laughed, imagining it. All of us together on Christmas morning, me, Daniel, Eleanor, James, my father, Linda, Emily and her husband, maybe even kids of their own someday. A family assembled from fragments held together by love and second chances. There's something I haven't told anyone, not even Daniel. Something I think about late at night when I can't sleep. Sometimes I'm angry at my father, not for the things he was convicted of. I know he didn't kill Rebecca, but for the things he actually did. The affair, the lies, the betrayal of my mother, the choices that put him in that situation in the first place. If he hadn't had the affair, he wouldn't have been at Rebecca's apartment that night. He wouldn't have been the obvious suspect. We wouldn't have lost 24 years. I know it's not logical. Matthew Carlson killed Rebecca, not my father's poor choices. But still, the anger sits there, a small hard stone in my chest that I can't quite dislodge. I talked to my therapist about it. Yes, I have a therapist now. After everything that happened, I realised I needed help processing it all. It's okay to be angry, Dr. Morrison told me. Love and anger aren't mutually exclusive. You can love your father and still be angry about his choices. You can be grateful he's free and still grieve the years you lost. But it feels wrong. After everything I did to free him, after all the time we've spent rebuilding our relationship, it feels ungrateful to still be angry. Feelings aren't logical. They don't follow rules about what's appropriate or grateful. They just are. The question is, what do you do with the anger? I've been thinking about that a lot. What do I do with this anger? I've decided to tell my father about it, not to hurt him, but because our relationship deserves honesty. We spent 24 years apart because of lies and secrets. I don't want to build our new relationship on hidden feelings. So last week I asked him to meet me for coffee, just the two of us at a quiet cafe near his apartment. He knew something was up as soon as he saw my face. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting down across from me. "Nothing's wrong exactly. I just need to tell you something, and it's hard." His face went pale. "Are you sick? Is Eleanor okay? James?" "No, everyone's fine. It's about us, about what happened." I took a breath, gathered my courage. "Dad, I love you. I'm so grateful you're in my life, that we found each other again. But I also need to tell you that I'm angry. Not about the murder. I know you didn't do that. But about the affair, about the choices you made that led to everything that happened." He sat very still, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "If you hadn't had the affair," I continued, "you wouldn't have been at Rebecca's apartment that night. You wouldn't have been the suspect. Matthew Carlson might have been caught immediately. We wouldn't have lost all those years." "You're right," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right. I know it's not logical. I know you didn't kill her, that Matthew Carlson is the one responsible. But I can't help feeling that your choices set everything in motion, and I'm angry about that." My father set down his coffee cup carefully. His hands were shaking. "I don't blame you for being angry," he said. "I'm angry too, at myself, at the choices I made, at the man I was back then. I was selfish and weak, and I destroyed so many lives. Your mother's, yours, mine, even Rebecca's in a way. If I hadn't been involved with her, maybe Matthew wouldn't have killed her. Maybe she'd still be alive. You can't know that. No, but I think about it all the time. The chain of events that my choices set in motion." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Meredith, I can't take back what I did. I can't undo the affair or the lies or the pain I caused. All I can do is apologize and try to be better now. But I understand if you can't forgive that. I understand if the anger is always going to be there. I want to forgive it, I said. I'm trying to forgive it. But I needed you to know that I'm still working on it, that some days are harder than others, that our relationship isn't perfect and probably never will be. No relationship is perfect, he said. We're all just broken people doing our best. But I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the second chance you gave me. We talked for 2 more hours sitting in that cafe. About his marriage to my mother, about why he'd had the affair, about his regrets and failures, and the man he wished he'd been. It didn't fix everything. The anger is still there, smaller now, but present. But talking about it, acknowledging it, refusing to pretend everything was perfect, that felt honest, real. And that's what our relationship needs. Not perfection, but honesty. Eleanor came home from school last week with a black eye and scraped knees. I was terrified. Had she been in a fight? Was she being bullied? But when I asked her what happened, she stood up straight and proud. A boy was making fun of Jessica for having 2 moms, she said. He said it was wrong and weird. So I told him my grandpa was in prison for 24 years for something he didn't do, and that what's really wrong is judging people without knowing their story. And then he pushed me, so I pushed him back. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry or ground her. Violence isn't the answer, I told her, trying to be the responsible parent. You should have told a teacher. I did tell a teacher. After I pushed him back. And you know what the teacher said? She said she was proud of me for standing up for Jessica, but that I should use my words next time, not my hands. She's right. I know. But Mom, I couldn't just let him be mean to Jessica. Her moms are really nice. Ma and Grandpa always says we have to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. When my father came for dinner that night, Eleanor ran to him and showed him her black eye like it was a badge of honor. Look, Grandpa, I got in a fight defending someone. My father looked at me, his expression a mix of concern and amusement. She gets that from you, he said. No, she gets it from you, I countered. You never gave up fighting for what was right, even when everyone said you were guilty. And I get it from both of you, Eleanor announced. I'm a fighter, like Grandpa and like Mom. That's what being brave means. Later, after the kids were in bed, my father and I sat on the porch. She's something special, he said. Both of them are. You've raised remarkable children. They had good teachers, I said. They learned about justice and standing up for what's right by watching us fight for you. Is that a good thing? Having their childhood shaped by something so heavy? I thought about it. I don't know, but I do know that they're learning that the truth matters, that family matters, that sometimes you have to fight for what's right even when everyone tells you you're wrong. Those seem like good lessons. I worry I've made your life harder, both by what I did 24 years ago and by being in your life now. People judge you for having a father who was in prison. Let them judge. The people who matter know the truth. And the people who judge without knowing the full story, their opinions don't matter. You sound like Eleanor, he said with a small smile. Good. I hope both my kids grow up knowing that other people's judgments don't define them, that the only thing that matters is knowing who you are and standing by the people you love. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets, distant traffic, the rustle of leaves in the wind. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if none of this had happened? My father asked. If I hadn't had the affair, if Rebecca hadn't been killed, if we'd just been a normal family? Sometimes, I admitted. But then I think about who I've become because of all this. I'm stronger, more determined. I don't take relationships for granted. I fight for what I believe in. Would I be that person if I'd had an easy life? Maybe not, but you shouldn't have had to become that person through trauma. No, I shouldn't have. But that's what happened and I can't change it. All I can do is decide what person I want to be moving forward. My father reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of who you've become, even if the path to get here was painful. Come too. You could have been bitter, angry, given up, but you didn't. You kept hope alive for 24 years. I had to. Hope was the only thing keeping me alive. Hope that someday, somehow, you'd know the truth, that we'd find our way back to each other. And we had. Against all odds, through decades of separation and lies and injustice, we'd found our way back to each other. Not to the relationship we'd had before, that father and that daughter were gone, lost to time and circumstance, but to something new. Something harder won and more honest and more precious, because we knew how easily it could have been lost forever. Last month I got a letter from Matthew Carlson. He wrote it from prison, where he's serving his sentence for Rebecca's murder. My first instinct was to throw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. The letter was strange, part apology, part justification, part plea for understanding. He said he'd never meant to kill Rebecca, that it had been an accident, that they'd argued and things had gotten out of hand. He said he'd been haunted by guilt for 24 years, but had been too afraid to come forward. He said he was sorry for what happened to my father, that he'd never intended for an innocent man to go to prison, that he'd thought about coming forward so many times but couldn't bring himself to do it. The letter made me angrier than anything else about this whole situation. He was sorry? He'd thought about coming forward? My father had spent 24 years in prison, 24 years of his life stolen, and Matthew Carlson had spent those same years free, building a career, getting married, having children, living the life my father should have had. And now he wanted forgiveness? Understanding? I showed the letter to my father. He read it silently, his face expressionless. "What do you think I should do with it?" I asked. "What do you want to do with it?" "I want to burn it. I want to write back and tell him exactly what I think of his apology. I want him to know that sorry doesn't begin to cover what he took from us." "Then do that," my father said. "If will make you feel better, write the letter. Tell him everything you need to say." So I did. I wrote 10 pages, pouring out all my anger, all my grief, all my fury at what he'd done and what he'd stolen, and his audacity in asking for understanding. Then I burned it. I didn't send it to him, because giving him my words, my pain, my energy, that felt like giving him something he didn't deserve. He'd taken enough from us. He didn't get my forgiveness too. My father didn't write back either. He said forgiveness was for himself, not for Matthew Carlson, that letting go of anger didn't require absolving the person who'd hurt you. "I forgive him for my own peace," he told me, "not because he deserves it, but because I don't want to carry that anger for the rest of my life. I've spent too many years angry already. I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll never be. But I'm okay with that. Some things don't require forgiveness. Some hurts are too deep, some injustices too profound. And that's okay. What matters is that we don't let the anger consume us. That we don't let Matthew Carlson continue to control our lives from his prison cell. We've taken back our power, our story, our family, and that's enough." This past weekend we had a celebration. It's been exactly 10 years since my father's release. We gathered at our house. All of us. My father, Linda, Emily and her family, Daniel's parents, friends who'd supported us through the trial, Raymond, the private investigator, even Patricia, my father's lawyer. We ate too much food, told stories, laughed until our sides hurt. Eleanor and James ran around with Emily's kids, all of them sticky with cake and wild with sugar. At one point, I stood on the porch watching everyone, and my father came to stand beside me. "This is more than I ever dreamed of," he said. "All these people, all this love. I spent so many years alone in a cell, wondering if anyone would remember me, if anyone cared, and now I have this." "You always had people who cared," I said. "You just didn't know it. But that's what made it so hard, the not knowing, the wondering if you'd forgotten me, if you hated me, if you'd moved on. The letters I wrote with no response. I never knew if you were getting them or if your mother was throwing them away." "She kept them," I said. "Every single one. She couldn't bring herself to throw them away, even though she didn't want me to see them. Maybe part of her knew that someday I'd need them. Or maybe she kept them out of guilt. Maybe. We'll never know." I looked at him. "Does it matter? She's gone. The letters served their purpose. They brought us back together. You're right. I spent too many years angry at your mother. It doesn't serve any purpose now." We watched the party together, all these people who'd become our family through choice rather than blood. "I want to say something," my father announced suddenly, loud enough that everyone stopped talking and looked at him. He raised his glass, and everyone else did the same. 10 years ago today, I walked out of prison a free man. I'd spent 24 years locked up for a crime I didn't commit, and I'd resigned myself to dying there. I'd given up hope of ever seeing my daughter again, of ever having a life outside those walls. His voice broke slightly, and Linda put her hand on his arm. "But Meredith didn't give up," he continued. "She found letters I'd written, letters her mother had hidden, and instead of being angry or bitter or deciding I wasn't worth the effort, she fought for me. She investigated, she hired a private investigator, she found the truth, and because of her, I'm standing here today." He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Meredith, you gave me back my life. You gave me the chance to be your father again, to meet my grandchildren, to build this family we have now. I can never repay that gift. All I can do is try to be worthy of it every single day." Everyone was crying now. Daniel, Linda, even Raymond, who I'd never seen show much emotion. "So I want to make a toast," my father said, "to Meredith, to courage and love and refusing to accept injustice, to second chances and found family and the power of truth. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for saving me." "To Meredith," everyone chorused, raising their glasses. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight, my eyes too blurred with tears. So I just raised my glass and smiled and let myself feel all of it. The joy, the grief, the gratitude, the love. We'd lost so much, but we'd also gained so much. And standing there surrounded by family, watching my father laugh with his grandchildren, seeing Daniel smile at me across the crowd, I realised something. I'd spent years learning to breathe again after losing my father, learning to live with the absence, the grief, the weight of what had been taken. But now I was learning something else, learning to live with presence, learning to accept joy without waiting for the other shoe to drop, learning that second chances, when they come, are meant to be embraced fully, not held at arm's length out of fear of losing them again. My father had 24 years stolen from him. Nothing could give those back, but he had now. We had now, and we were determined not to waste a single moment of it. Eleanor is 10 years old now, James is 7, and we have a new addition, a baby girl we named Rebecca. My father cried when we told him what we'd chosen to name her. "Are you sure?" he asked. "After everything that happened?" "She was a victim too," I said. "She deserves to be remembered for more than just how she died. And maybe, in some small way, naming our daughter after her is a reminder that we're all connected, that one person's tragedy can ripple through so many lives." Little Rebecca is 6 months old now, and she adores her grandfather. He holds her for hours, singing to her, telling her stories, marvelling at her tiny fingers and toes. "I missed this with you," he told me last week as he rocked Rebecca to sleep. "When you were a baby, I was there for all of it. But then I lost you, and I thought I'd never experience this again, that I'd never hold a grandchild, never get to see you as a mother. But you're here now. That's what matters." "Every moment feels like a gift," he said, looking down at sleeping Rebecca. "Every single moment." My father is 75 now. He's starting to slow down, arthritis in his hands, some hearing loss, the inevitable march of time. He jokes that prison aged him, that he's really 90 inside, even if the calendar says otherwise. But he's happy, really truly happy, in a way I don't think he was even before prison. There's a lightness to him now, a gratitude for simple things that most people take for granted. He teaches online classes, mentors other exonerees, speaks at law schools about wrongful convictions. He's writing a book about his experience, finally ready to put it all into words. And he spends time with us. So much time. He's at our house almost every day, helping with homework, playing with the kids, just being present, making up for lost time, even though we know we can never truly make up for it. We can only move forward, taking each day as it comes. Sometimes people ask me if it was worth it, all the time and energy and money and emotional toll of fighting for my father's freedom. The answer is always yes. Not because everything turned out perfectly. It didn't. My father still has nightmares. I still have moments of anger about the years we lost. The kids know their grandfather went to prison, and someday they'll be old enough to understand the full story, which might be painful for them. But yes, it was worth it. Because truth matters, justice matters, family matters, and because the alternative, letting my father rot in prison for a crime he didn't commit, never knowing if he was innocent, never giving him a chance to know his grandchildren, that would have been unbearable. I think about my mother sometimes, about the choice she made to hide those letters. I understand it better now that I have children of my own. The instinct to protect them, to shield them from pain, can make you do things that seem incomprehensible to anyone else. She thought she was protecting me. She was wrong, but she thought she was doing the right thing. I've forgiven her for that. Not because what she did was okay, but because holding on to anger towards someone who's dead doesn't serve any purpose. It just weighs you down. My father has forgiven her too, I think. He understands that her pain was real, that watching him have an affair and then be accused of murder destroyed something in her, that keeping us apart was her way of trying to regain some control over a situation that felt completely out of control. It was wrong, but it came from pain, not malice, and in the end, the truth came out anyway. Maybe later than it should have, but not too late. Not so late that we couldn't build something new from the wreckage. Last week, I took my father back to Douglas Correctional Facility. He didn't want to go at first. Why would he? Why would anyone want to revisit the place where they'd spent 24 years of their life locked away? But there was a program for exonerees, a chance to speak to current inmates, to give them hope that the justice system could correct its mistakes, that it was never too late for the truth to come out. I don't know if I can do it, my father said when they first asked him. Going back there, I don't know if I'm strong enough. You don't have to, I told him. No one would blame you if you said no. But if my story can help someone else, if there's another innocent person in there who's losing hope. So he agreed, and I went with him. Walking through those gates again was surreal. The last time we'd been there together, he'd been an inmate. Now he was a visitor, a free man, someone on the other side. They led us to a room where about 30 inmates had gathered. Some looked skeptical, some looked curious, some looked like they'd given up on everything a long time ago. My father stood up in front of them, and for a moment he couldn't speak. I could see him struggling with the memories, with being back in this place. Then he found his voice. "My name is James Mitchell," he said. 24 years ago, I was convicted of a murder I didn't commit. I spent nearly a quarter century in a place like this, in a cell like yours, believing I would die here. He talked for an hour about the investigation, the trial, the years in prison, about writing letters that never got responses, about losing hope and finding it again, about his daughter who refused to give up on him. And then he introduced me. "This is Meredith," he said, "my daughter. The reason I'm standing here today instead of still sitting in a cell. She found evidence the police had missed, hired investigators, fought for years to prove my innocence. Because of her, I'm free." The inmates looked at me with a mix of emotions, hope, envy, grief for what they'd lost and might never get back. One of them raised his hand. "How did you know he was innocent? With all the evidence against him, how did you know to keep fighting?" I thought about how to answer that, about the letters, the investigation, the evidence we'd found. But in the end, the answer was simpler than that. "I knew because I loved him," I said. And because when you love someone, really love them, you don't give up on them just because it's hard or inconvenient, or everyone tells you you're wrong. You fight for them. You believe in them. You refuse to accept injustice. Another inmate, younger, maybe in his 20s, asked, "What if no one's fighting for us? What if we don't have a daughter or anyone who believes us?" My father answered that one. "Then you fight for yourself. You write letters. You study the law. You document everything. You never stop asserting your innocence. Because sometimes years later, someone will listen. Someone will care. Justice can be slow, but it's not impossible." After the talk, several inmates came up to speak to us privately. They told us their stories, their claims of innocence, their pleas for help. We couldn't help them all. We didn't have the resources or the time or the expertise. But my father collected their information, promised to pass it along to the Innocence Project, to other organisations that work on wrongful convictions. As we walked out of the prison, back through security, back through those gates, my father stopped and looked back at the building. "There are innocent people in there," he said quietly. "Right now, at this moment, there are people sitting in cells for crimes they didn't commit, just like I was." "We can't save them all," I said. "I know, but maybe we can save some. Maybe someone will hear about my story and decide to investigate their case. Maybe we can prevent someone else from losing 24 years. That's what he does now, in addition to teaching and being a grandfather. He works with wrongful conviction organisations, reviews cases, speaks out about criminal justice reform. He's taken his pain, his stolen years, and turned them into purpose. I'm so proud of him for that. Eleanor asked me yesterday what I'd tell my younger self if I could go back in time. We were doing homework together. She had to write an essay about an important moment in her life. She'd chosen to write about learning that her grandfather had been in prison and what it taught her about justice. "I don't know," I said, thinking about it. "Maybe I'd tell her that the truth is worth fighting for, even when everyone says you're wrong." "Would you tell her that everything would be okay, that Grandpa would get out of prison?" No, because I didn't know if everything would be okay. There were so many moments when I thought we'd lose, when it seemed hopeless. If I'd known for certain it would work out, maybe I wouldn't have fought as hard. That doesn't make sense. Why would knowing it would be okay make you fight less hard? Because sometimes we need the fear of failure to push us to give everything we have. If I'd known the outcome, maybe I would have relaxed, made mistakes. The uncertainty made me careful, thorough, determined. Eleanor thought about this as she wrote in her notebook. "I think I'd want to know," she said finally. "If I was fighting for something really hard, I'd want to know it would work out. Maybe, but life doesn't give us those guarantees. We just have to do our best with what we know and hope it's enough." She wrote that down in her essay. Later, when I read what she'd written, I cried. She'd written about courage, about how it doesn't mean not being afraid, but doing the right thing even when you're terrified. She'd written about her mom and grandpa, about how they'd fought for each other when everyone said it was hopeless. And she'd ended with this. "My grandpa says that truth is like a seed buried in the ground. Sometimes it takes a long time to grow, and sometimes you have to dig through a lot of dirt to find it. But it's always there, waiting, and when you finally find it and bring it into the light, it's worth everything it took to get there." My father cried when he read it too. "She's wise," he said, "wiser than I was at her age. You've raised remarkable children, Meredith." "We've raised them," I corrected. "Daniel and me and you and Linda. All of us together." "I like that," he said. "All of us together. That's what family means, isn't it? Not just blood, but the people who show up for each other, who fight for each other, who refuse to give up on each other. That's exactly what it means." I'm writing this late at night in the quiet house with everyone else asleep. My father stayed for dinner tonight, like he does most nights. And after the kids went to bed, we sat on the porch and talked about nothing and everything. About his book, which is nearly finished. About Eleanor's upcoming school play. About James's first loose tooth. About baby Rebecca's first word, which was Papa, her name for my father. Ordinary conversations about ordinary life. The kind of conversations we were denied for 24 years. Before he left, he hugged me tight. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for believing in me, for fighting for me, for giving me this life." "You don't have to keep thanking me," I said. "You're my father. I love you." "I know, but I'll probably keep saying it anyway, because I never want to take this for granted. I never want to forget how close I came to losing it all forever." After he left, I came in to write. To put all of this into words while it's still fresh, while I can still feel the full weight of everything that's happened. Because in 10 years or 20 years, when my memory has softened the edges, when the pain has faded and only the good parts remain, I want to remember the whole truth. I want to remember how hard it was, how many times I wanted to give up, how uncertain I was, how afraid, how close we came to losing everything. But I also want to remember how we didn't give up, how we fought for each other, how we refused to let injustice have the final word. My father's case was unusual. Most wrongful convictions are never overturned. Most innocent people who go to prison die there, their truth buried with them. We were lucky. Lucky that my mother kept those letters. Lucky that we found new evidence. Lucky that we had the resources to hire investigators and lawyers. Lucky that the truth came out before my father died in prison. But it wasn't just luck. It was also persistence. It was refusal to accept the easy answer. It was love that wouldn't quit. And that's what I want people to know. That justice is possible, even when it seems impossible. That truth matters, even when it's buried under decades of lies. That love, real, fierce, unwavering love, can move mountains. My father lost 24 years. I lost 24 years with him. Those years are gone forever, and nothing can bring them back. But we have now. We have tomorrow. We have however many years we get from this point forward. And I've learned something crucial through all of this. Time is not the only measure of a relationship. Quality matters more than quantity. Presence matters more than perfection. My father's been back in my life for 10 years. 10 years versus the 24 we lost. Mathematically, we're still in debt. We still have 14 more years to go before we've caught up. But that's not how it works. We'll never catch up, never make up for what was stolen, but we can build something new, something that honors the past while refusing to be imprisoned by it. I think about the woman I was 10 years ago, standing in my mother's bedroom, opening that shoebox of letters with shaking hands. She was so lost, so uncertain, so afraid of what she might find. If I could go back and tell her anything, it would be this. You're stronger than you know. The path ahead is going to be harder than you can imagine. You're going to want to quit 1,000 times. You're going to doubt yourself, doubt your father, doubt whether truth is even possible. But keep going. Keep fighting. Because on the other side of all that pain and struggle and uncertainty, there's something beautiful waiting. There's a father who will hold his granddaughter and cry with joy. There's Sunday dinners and ordinary Tuesdays and a family assembled from broken pieces. There's a life worth living, worth fighting for, worth all the tears and fear and sleepless nights. The truth will set you free. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually. And when it does, you'll finally be able to breathe again. Really breathe, deeply and fully, and without the weight of secrets pressing down on your chest. It's late now, almost midnight. I should go to bed, join Daniel, who's been asleep for hours, but I want to sit here a little longer in this quiet house, thinking about everything we've been through, everything we've survived, everything we've built. Tomorrow, my father is coming over to help James build a birdhouse. It's such a simple thing, such an ordinary grandfather-grandson activity, but for us, it's extraordinary. It's a miracle, because it almost didn't happen. My father almost died in prison, never knowing his grandchildren, never getting to teach James how to use a hammer or tell Eleanor stories about ancient civilizations or hold baby Rebecca while she sleeps. But he didn't. He survived. We found each other. We fought our way back to this, to Sunday dinners and school plays and birdhouses and ordinary love. Eleanor asked me once if I believed in happy endings. I believe in honest endings, I told her. Endings that acknowledge all the pain and struggle and loss, but also make room for joy and hope and second chances. That's better than a happy ending. It's a real ending. This is our real ending. Not perfect, not without scars, not able to erase the past, but real and honest and full of love. My father is 75 years old. He probably has another 15 or 20 years if we're lucky. Maybe less, maybe more. We don't know. What we do know is that we won't waste them. We won't take them for granted. We won't let fear or anger or pain keep us from being present with each other. We've learned the hard way that time is precious, that the people we love can be taken from us in an instant or gradually over decades, that nothing is guaranteed except this moment right now. So we hold tight to each other. We show up. We do the work. We build memories that will sustain us when the inevitable losses come, because they will come. My father won't live forever. Neither will I. Someday my children will be sitting where I am now, looking back on their lives, deciding what stories to tell about the grandmother and grandfather they loved. I hope they'll say that we taught them about courage, about justice, about refusing to accept the easy lie when the hard truth is within reach. I hope they'll say that we loved each other fiercely and imperfectly and with everything we had. I hope they'll say that we took broken pieces and built something beautiful. The last letter my father wrote to me, the one from just before my mother got sick, the last one she hid, said this: "Dear Meredith, I'm 70 years old today. I've spent more than half my life in prison for a crime I didn't commit. By any measure, that's a tragedy. My life was stolen from me, and I'll never get it back. But here's what I've learned. You can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond. And I've chosen to respond with hope. I hope that someday, somehow, you'll read these letters, that you'll know I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped loving you, never stopped believing we'd find each other again. I hope that when that day comes, if it comes, you'll be able to forgive me. Not just for being in prison, but for the mistakes I made that led me here. For the affair, for the lies, for not being the father you deserved. And I hope that we'll have time, even if it's just a little time, even if it's measured in months instead of years. I hope we'll have time to be a family again. Happy birthday to me, 70 years old, and I'm still hoping. I love you, sweetheart. Always, your dad." When I read that letter for the first time, I sobbed, because he'd been hoping year after year, decade after decade, and somehow impossibly that hope had been rewarded. We got our time, not as much as we should have had, but more than he dared to dream of. And we're still hoping, still believing, still fighting for more time, more memories, more ordinary moments that add up to a life. That's what this story is really about. Not about a wrongful conviction or a fight for justice, though it's those things too. It's about hope, about refusing to let go of hope, even when every rational thought says you should. About believing in the possibility of redemption and second chances and truth that emerges from darkness. It's about love. The kind of love that writes letters for 23 years with no guarantee they'll ever be read. The kind of love that fights an entire justice system because the alternative is unacceptable. The kind of love that shows up day after day, even when it's hard. And it's about breathing, learning to breathe when the weight of grief and loss and injustice has been pressing down on your chest for so long you've forgotten what it feels like to be light. Learning to take full, deep breaths that fill your lungs with air and hope and the possibility of tomorrow. That's what I want to leave you with. Not just my story, but this truth. You are stronger than you know. The fights worth fighting are always the hard ones. And sometimes, just sometimes, hope wins. Sometimes the truth emerges from decades of darkness. Sometimes the people we thought we'd lost forever find their way back to us. Sometimes broken things can be mended. Not perfectly, but beautifully. And sometimes, after years of holding our breath, we finally remember how to breathe again. I'm going to end this here, in this quiet moment, in this house full of sleeping people I love. Tomorrow we'll wake up and do it all again. Make breakfast, get the kids ready, go to work, come home, have dinner, put the kids to bed. Ordinary life. The life my father dreamed of for 24 years. The life I fought for. The life we're living now. Gratefully and fully, and with our eyes wide open to how precious it is. If you're reading this, if you're listening to my words and you're fighting for someone you love, don't give up. Even when it seems hopeless, even when everyone tells you you're wrong, even when the system seems designed to defeat you, keep fighting, keep hoping, keep believing that truth matters, that justice is possible, that love can overcome impossible odds, because sometimes it does. And if you're the one who's been wronged, if you're sitting in a cell or a bad situation or a life that feels like a prison, don't lose hope. Keep asserting your truth, keep reaching out, keep believing that someone somewhere will listen, because sometimes they do. My father spent 24 years hoping someone would believe him. I spent 34 years not knowing my father had been hoping for me. And then, because of letters hidden in an attic and a daughter who refused to accept comfortable lies, we found each other again. It wasn't too late. It's never too late for truth. It's never too late for love. It's never too late to learn how to breathe again. That's what I believe now, after everything we've been through. That's what I want you to believe too. The truth is out there, waiting. Love is possible, even after decades of separation. Hope is not foolish. It's the bravest thing we can hold on to, and every moment we get with the people we love is a gift. Not because we deserve it, but because we fought for it, because we refused to give up, because we chose hope over resignation, truth over lies, love over fear. That's my story. That's my truth. And I'm still learning to breathe, still grateful for every breath, still amazed that we made it here at all. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with me through all of this, the pain and the hope and the long, uncertain journey toward truth. I hope my story touched something in your heart. I hope it reminded you that the fights worth fighting are always the hard ones, that family is worth fighting for, that truth matters even when it's buried for decades. If any of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a small whisper in the comments below about justice, about hope, about the people you fought for, or the truths you've uncovered. Your stories matter too. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges, about love and loss and the courage to keep going, just stay close, subscribe, and let's walk this path together. Because we're all fighting for something. We're all carrying our own weight of silent rooms and hidden truths and people we refuse to give up on. And together, we're stronger. Together, we remember how to breathe. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Hold tight to the people you love. Fight for the truths that matter, and never, ever stop believing that hope can win. This is Olivia whispering to your heart, reminding you that you're not alone, and that sometimes, just sometimes, broken things can become beautiful again.